Chapter 161 Training Lightning Release. After reaching home, Fujin thought, I guess that's the highest level of difficulty a rank B mission can get. Looks like my self-analysis of being Junin level wasn't incorrect. Unfortunately, Konoha wouldn't promote me anytime soon. Also, tougher missions would mean that my life will be at more risk. My calculations were right. I should use this time to strengthen myself as much as I can. Fujin entered one of the rooms in the basement and turned on the lights. The room was empty. Fujin took out a scroll and summoned a few devices. There was a transformer, an ammeter, an ohmmeter, rubber boots, rubber gloves, and a few wires. Fujin wore the boots and began arranging the setup while thinking. In order to avoid suspicion, I memorized the training process for all 5 elements long back. Only training methods for yang and yin elements aren't available in the library. For the lightning element, the way to train is a bit complicated as compared to wind and earth, though at the same time it is straightforward. I just have to endure shocks in increasing intensity to master it. I will first need to measure the resistance of my body, and then I will have to use the transformer to subject my body to increasing voltages. That will induce a current to flow through my body. Even that has to be done in phases. My limbs can endure a higher current. But if a current passes through my heart or brain, then it could be lethal. Those 2 parts will have to be trained separately. Anyways, the first step of learning lightning release is being able to withstand 10 ampere current through my whole body for 1 minute. The second step is to produce that much current on my hands. With these 2 steps alone, I will be able to learn lightning jutsus up to rank B. Rank A and S will need me to be able to resist and produce a stronger current. That said, increasing the intensity of the current that I can produce will strengthen the lower rank jutsus. Of course, on the flip side, I can use rank C and lower jutsus after being able to produce a current of 100 milliamperes, but it won't be very strong. Fujin completed the setup. He created a shadow clone to control the voltage. The setup had 2 open-ended wires. Fujin grabbed one with his left hand. He taped the second wire to his upper arm. This way, the current would enter his hand, pass through his arm and leave through the wire attached to his upper arm. The clone set the output of the transformer to T and switched it on. The current began flowing through Fujin's body. A number appeared on the ammeter, which was attached to the circuit. It read 0.125 milliampere. Fujin began calculating. 0.125 milliamperes for 10 volts would mean that my body resistance is 80. 0 ohm. The scroll said that I should be able to feel the current when it reaches 1 milliampere. He looked at his clone and said, increase it to 80 volts. His clone nodded and increased the output of the transformer. Immediately, Fujin began to feel a slight tingling sensation through his arm. Fujin let the current flow through his arm for a minute. He looked at his clone and said, increase to 200 volts. His clone increased it. The current rose to 2.5 milliampere. It still wasn't painful for Fujin. Fujin recalled the details in the scroll. The scroll was right at stating that we will feel the current at 1 milliampere. At 5 milliamperes will feel very disturbing to a normal human being, but it won't be very painful. From 6 milliamperes, it will start getting painful. From then on, the muscles will start losing control. If a normal human is hit by this, he will just let go of the object that electrified them involuntarily. Beyond 17 milliamperes, a normal human will begin experiencing extreme pain. He can't let go of the object, and there is a chance of death. Beyond 100 milliamperes, pumping of the heart becomes uncoordinated, and nerve damage begins. At 2 ampere, there will be a high chance of cardiac arrest, internal organ damage, and severe burns. Death becomes very likely, but as a ninja who has trained my body using chakra, my endurance could be higher. It will still be very dangerous though. I should be very patient once it begins to hurt. He said, increase it to 400 volts. The clone increased it and said, don't forget that the body's resistance will suddenly decrease after 500 volts. Fujin nodded and said, yes, but the decrease in resistance is due to the outer layer of the skin breaking down. Due to my training, it might be higher for me. Anyways, keep an eye on the ammeter. If the value suddenly begins increasing, turn the switch off. A second or 2 of high current won't be lethal. Besides, there is also the fuse, which will melt at 100 milliamperes. The clone nodded. Fujin kept raising the voltage slowly. After half an hour, the clone had increased the output of the transformer to 4000 volts. A 50 milliampere current passed through Fujin's arm. Fujin thought, finally I can feel some pain. Looks like my endurance is around 8 to 10 times higher than a normal human when it comes to electricity. He took some time to get used to the pain. Once the pain subsided, he increased the voltage more, at 5000 V. The reading on the ammeter was 62.5 milliampere. However, it suddenly began increasing rapidly. The clone immediately turned the switch off. Fujin let go of the wire and removed the one he attached. He shook his arm a few times and said, "That hurt." The clone chuckled and said, 62.5 milliampere in under an hour is great progress. However, Fujin shook his head and said, "This is just the natural endurance I have developed over the years. The main training will start from now onwards. I have a feeling that this will take a long time just to reach the necessary endurance." He thought, I wonder how Sasuke managed to learn lightning release and master Chidori in under a month. Was it just his talent and the Sharingan? Or does Kakashi know the Hatake clan have a better way to master the lightning release? Fujin repeated the same training for his remaining 3 limbs. He followed it up by sending current from one hand to the other, allowing the current to flow through his chest. He started low and stopped at 5 milliampere. He repeated the same for a current to pass from the top of his head to the ground after removing his shoes. Fujin trained this way for a week. By then, he could endure currents of 500 milliampere passing through his limbs and 100 milliampere through his whole body. He also managed to generate a current of 250 milliampere on his hand in these 7 days in order to avoid any suspicion. He also went to the training ground for an early morning workout and after lunch to practice his wind release and wind vacuum technique for a couple of hours daily. The lightning training also had a great effect on Fujin's physique. Fujin noticed, in addition to learning lightning release, this method has a great effect on my body. I can feel my body getting slightly stronger due to those electric shocks, though I guess that it will become ineffective after some time. Just like the Senju Taijutsu style increased my chakra, still this physical buff will be very helpful. For the next couple of months, Fujin focused on training his lightning element. The lightning training along with the intense morning workout had done wonders for his body. He now operated the training seal at 95% capacity. During this time, his team did 7 rank B missions. Having seen his capabilities, Fujin was given a much more active role in the team. Unfortunately, the missions weren't very challenging. Finally, Fujin managed to generate 10 ampere current. He and his clone grinned as they read 10 on the ammeter. Fujin said, "Time to learn lightning ninjutsu now. You go to the library, check out the jutsus of lightning, fire and water release." The clone nodded and left. Fujin meditated in the meditation room until the clone sent the info back. The clone began going through all fire, lightning and water jutsus in sections E, D, C and B. Of course, he only read the lightning jutsus with full focus. As for the fire and water element scrolls, the clone analyzed the lightning jutsus he read while pretending to read those scrolls. After a couple of hours, the clone dispelled and sent the information back. Chapter 162. Should I form a personal force? Fujin's eyes in the meditation room suddenly opened. A frown formed on his face when he received the information. Wind and lightning are indeed a bad combination. Though the clone found decent ninjutsus, there wasn't a single lightning jutsu that could complement my current skills. He analyzed for some time before concluding, looks like other than Rikiju's lightning cloak mode and Sasuke's Kirin, the remaining lightning jutsus won't be of any use to me when it comes to improving my strength. So that leaves only concealment. Alright, I'll form a new combat system based on my lightning jutsus. I won't use any wind jutsus or jutsus that can connect me with Konoha, except the shadow clone and body flicker jutsus. The basis of this new system will be speed complemented by high accuracy and high penetration power attacks. While I don't have any immediate need of creating such a persona, I am currently in a very peaceful phase with a lot of free time. It's best to create this combat system before my life becomes hectic. With that decided, time to start learning the jutsus. I'll start. Fujin's thoughts were interrupted as he heard a doorbell. He wondered, who'd come to visit at this time? Is Renjiro back? No, the chakra signature is too low. Fujin went up to check. Before opening the door, he sealed up the entrance to the basement. Fujin opened the door to see 5 faces that he didn't recognize. After a few seconds, he recognized a couple of them and was surprised. He thought, well, what a surprise. I nearly forgot about these 2. I wonder why they are here. Uki Daisaku said with a bit of nervousness. Hey Fujin, how have you been? Tatsuya also greeted Fujin. Fujin said, I have been doing well. How about you too? Anyways, come in. The 5 young boys entered his house. Daisaku looked around the house with marvel. He was already surprised when he saw it from the outside. He exclaimed, your house is magnificent, Fujin. Fujin said, thanks. They sat in the circular room. Fujin asked, so what brings you here? Also, who are these 3? Daisaku introduced them. They are our good friends. They are Anzi Buncho Handa Buniro and Irai Ryama. They're our best friends from our class and are orphans, just like us. Fujin checked each one of them. All seem normal. He said, "Hey," they greeted Fujin back. Fujin noticed a bit of nervousness on Daisukyu's face. He said, "Fujin, we actually came here because we wanted to ask for your help." Fujin asked, "What help?" He said, "Actually, we are struggling in the academy. Our graduation exams are less than half a year away and I am afraid that we will fail. We saw your fight in the Chunin exams and saw how you defeated everyone with ease. Even the kids from ninja clans weren't a match for you. So we wanted to ask for your help and guidance to pass the exam." Fujin was surprised to hear that. It wasn't just the request that surprised him, but rather the change in Daisukyu. He thought, "I know that the adults in this world are scheming bastards, but how the fuck did this straightforward guy become such a smooth talker?" He perfectly blended flattering with the request such that it wouldn't seem too much, and instead look very genuine. Seeing that Fujin was not answering made the 5 boys a bit nervous. They had decided to let Daisukyu do most of the talking as he was familiar with Fujin. But as Fujin didn't reply, Tatsui asked, Fujin replied, "Can you tell me what have you learnt so far, and what areas are you struggling in?" They immediately began telling Fujin their issues. Fujin paid half attention to their words. As for the remaining half, he was thinking, what to do? I have no interest in teaching them. After all, even though I have time, I also have a crazy amount of stuff that I want to learn. The only gain I can see from helping them is getting their favor. Another possible gain could be an improvement in reputation if my kind deeds are spread. But neither gain is significant. Even if I gain their favor, what can a bunch of genins do for me? And in a world where power reigns supreme, reputation isn't worth anything. At most it could improve my image in Hiruzen's eyes, but I don't expect him to give me any more benefits anytime soon. The only gain that could be worth it is if I gain their loyalty and they become my subordinates. In that case, I could create a small power base in Konoha. It won't be as powerful as any clan, but it would have great potential to grow, especially once Danzo is out of the picture and the insane casualties of the Fourth Great War leave a lot of orphans that I could recruit. But, do I even need such an organization, especially within Konoha? And will these guys be that loyal? Fujin analyzed quickly before reaching the conclusion. No, a faction within Konoha will be watched by many eyes. If I infringe upon the benefits of others, we will be hit by a multitude of schemes that would leave us a mess, and it would eat into my precious training times. All the attention would also make it much more difficult for me to do anything in the dark. More importantly, these guys can't be trusted to be that loyal. The root is loyal to Danzo, as he picked them up when they were orphans, and has completely brainwashed and indoctrinated them. While Orochimaru picked up kids who had lost everything and had no hope and gave them food, power, hope and dreams, which is why his subordinates were loyal to him. Of course, in addition, both also used seals to keep their subordinates in check. Neither of those two cases applies here. Even if I stayed in touch with them after I entered the academy and became best friends and helped them, I wouldn't have that level of loyalty. At most, it will be a strong friendship bond and a sense of camaraderie, like the bond between Naruto and Shikamaru. That said, I do plan on creating an organization outside Konoha. I have a lot of plans that an organization could simplify. Perhaps training these guys could provide me with insights on how to train the ones I take in my future organization. I guess I will need to create a proper training system for the organization in order for them to be useful, or perhaps create something like the curse mark to strengthen and control them. After a long internal debate, Fujin decided to aid them. He had heard what Daisuke said. Apparently, their class wasn't taught as much as Fujin's class was. They were taught the 3 academy ninjutsu in the 6th year. In the previous 5 years, they were only taught theory, hand signs, leaf concentration, shuriken throwing, kunai wielding, and various survival skills needed to be a ninja. None of the 5 ever mentioned visiting the library. After they stopped speaking, Fujin said, "Let's go outside. Show me how you perform the 3 jutsus." Their eyes brightened when they heard it. It meant that Fujin was planning to teach them. They left the house. Daisuke started first. He said, "I will start with the substitution jutsu." He began making hand signs. Fujin thought, correct hand signs but too slow. Daisuke wanted to use the substitution jutsu to impress Fujin, but Fujin was staring right at him without looking away. The substitution jutsu worked on misdirection. With Fujin staring directly at him, he had no way to misdirect Fujin. He tried to time his substitution jutsu to the time Fujin blinked his eyes, but Fujin saw it clearly as he grabbed the log next to him and swapped positions with it. Seeing Fujin's eyes following him left him embarrassed. Fujin said, "This looks all right. Though you have to be faster. Show me the transformation jutsu. Transform into Tatsuya." Daisuke nodded and made hand signs and transformed into Tatsuya. There were a lot of imperfections in the jutsu. Fujin said, "You will have to practice this more. Show me the clone jutsu." Daisuke made hand signs. Immediately a clone appeared next to him. But the clone looked nothing like him. In fact, Fujin doubted whether it could even walk. Fujin thought, "I guess Naruto isn't the only one who sucks at this." Daisuke was embarrassed looking at the clone. Fujin asked the others to display their jutsus as well. All four could do one jutsu satisfactorily, but struggled in the remaining two. Fujin said, "Actually, there is not much I can do to aid you with the jutsus directly. You guys will just have to practice until you learn. I will instead help you with some other techniques that would aid you in learning jutsus faster." Their expressions fell when they heard that Fujin won't be able to help them, but on hearing that he will teach them other techniques, they got excited. They had seen the jutsus Fujin used in the Chunin exam. They thought, if he taught us even one jutsus from the ones he used in the exam, we will be the strongest in our class. Unfortunately, their sky-high expectations were set to fall on the ground and be broken into a million pieces. Chapter 163 Learning Lightning Jutsus. Fujin said, "How long can you guys hold the leaf on your head during the leaf concentration exercise?" Daisuke answered, 23 minutes. Tatsuya said 28 minutes. Buncho said 17 minutes. Buniro said 38 minutes. Ryama said 26 minutes. Fujin said, "That's very low. No need to practice any ninjutsu for now. Increase that to 1 hour. Tatsuya immediately complained, "But that exercise is so boring." Fujin said, "Not really a choice, Tatsuya." Ryama complained, "Can't you just teach us any of your jutsus, Fujin?" Fujin looked at him and said harshly, "The reason why I could become strong is that my basics are good. If any of you can't maintain the leaf for an hour, you should give up your dreams of becoming a ninja and drop out of the academy." Fujin's reply shocked them. Fujin was their age. They expected him to be cordial with them and help them like a friend. They never imagined that he'd be stricter than the academy teachers. Before anyone could make another comment to upset Fujin, Daisuke said, "All right, Fujin, we will work on it." Fujin said, "Come back after you guys manage this. Oh, and come around noon. If I'm not at home at that time, then I'm doing a mission, so check after a few days." Daisuke nodded. Fujin returned back home. While they left his property, they immediately began complaining. Bunidro said, "This was a waste of time. I admired him so much. I never thought that he would be so arrogant." Ramo agreed. "Yes, he asked us to quit the academy if we can't do a stupid leaf exercise." Daisuke said, "Though we grew up together, we haven't been very close since we joined the academy. We should be glad that he at least agreed to help us." Buncho added, "I heard that he was able to hold the leaf for over an hour in his second year in the academy, so his advice could be right." Tatsuya sighed and said, "Anyways, we are struggling in the academy. Let's give his method a try. If it works, we will become ninjas. If it doesn't, it won't be much different." They talked for a bit before deciding to follow his instruction. Fujin had anticipated such a reaction when he said those harsh words, but he didn't care. He didn't care about these 5. It didn't matter to him if they graduated or not. He was just seeing how he could instruct any future subordinates properly. If his future subordinates complained as they did, he would just let them go or kill them depending on the situation. He didn't have the time to raise someone who was both lazy and untalented. Fujin left this whole episode behind him and began deciding which jutsu he should start with. He entered the bottom basement and thought, my clone picked 11 jutsus to learn. However, 3 of them are very inconvenient to use in battle. However, these 3 look like they are preparatory jutsus for Raikage's lightning cloak. I guess Konoha managed to deduce some of the steps to learn it. Not really surprising, but they didn't manage to completely deduce it. Though there is a possibility that they did deduce it but didn't put it in the library. Another 3 jutsus are a series of jutsus. The DNC rank variants will be dropped in the future. Another jutsu has potential but is highly inaccurate. That leaves me with 1 utility jutsu, 1 defensive jutsu, 1 long-range jutsu, and 1 mid-range jutsu, in addition to the rank B jutsu. Konoha's stock of lightning jutsus is disappointing. Another issue is that there is no lightning instantaneous body jutsu, so long-range escape with this element isn't possible. I'll have to depend on the flicker jutsu. Anyways, I'll start with the series and then move on to the 3 preparatory jutsus. Even though they don't have much use on the battlefield, they might be able to strengthen my body further. Fujin made hand signs and extended his right arm straight. A lightning bolt formed in his palm and shot towards the metal statue, and barely missed it. Fujin analyzed. Wow, learnt in one try. I suppose now that I have learnt so many jutsus, I'll have an easier time learning new jutsus, especially if it's only a D-rank jutsu. Anyways, it looks like I will have to perfect the aim of this lightning bolt jutsu, then I can move on to the lightning blast jutsu. Shouldn't take long. Fujin began practicing. In a few hours he managed to gain 100% accuracy with the jutsu. The lightning bolt jutsu didn't do much damage. At best, the opponent will suffer minor electric shocks, though it could paralyze the opponent temporarily. Fujin moved on to the lightning blast jutsu. It was a C-rank jutsu. It worked the same as the lightning bolt jutsu. The only difference was that instead of one lightning bolt, it would attack the target with a continuous blast of lightning. The jutsu would continue hitting the opponent until the user decided to stop it or doesn't have the chakra to keep it up. Fujin managed to learn and aim it correctly in under a day, however. He realized a crucial issue. Though I can aim properly, I can't control the intensity of the shocks perfectly. Only in around 15% of cases, it was as intense as I wanted it to be. Fujin sighed in relief. I'm glad I didn't try those jutsus before realizing this issue. It could have been bad. Sigh, I keep underestimating this world. There is danger even while learning a jutsu. Anyways, this issue shouldn't affect me while learning the lightning beam jutsu. I'll train my control after learning this jutsu. Lightning beam jutsu was a B-rank jutsu. This jutsu was just a powered-up version of the lightning blast jutsu. It could fire a beam twice as wide as the lightning blast jutsu. The shocks from this jutsu would be very painful and fatal. Even if someone dodges this jutsu, they could still be attacked if they are within 2 feet of the beam. Due to the high power of the jutsu, small lightning arcs are expelled occasionally from the beam that can hit anyone in the vicinity and cause more damage than the lightning bolt jutsu. 3 days after Fujin began learning the jutsu, Fujin was standing in front of a metal statue. He made the hand signs and aimed his right palm at the statue. Lightning appeared in his palm, and a beam was fired at the statue. The lightning beam hit the statue. The statue kept getting hit by the beam for 30 seconds when Fujin finally stopped it. The statue was in a bad shape. The face had melted and couldn't be called a face anymore. Multiple cracks had occurred on the surface of the statue. Fujin smiled. All right, single target mid-range jutsu learnt. Now I should work on control. Fujin returned to the room where he had endured electric shocks. He opened his scroll and took out a few items. He set up a circuit. The circuit had an 80 kilo ohm resistor and an ammeter connected with a wire. Another couple of wires were connected to the other end of the ammeter and the resistor. These wires were left open. Fujin grabbed the wires and began generating electricity with his right hand. The current flowed through the circuit and values began appearing on the ammeter. Fujin decided, 3 ampere current. Let me try to keep it at 1 ampere for 10 minutes. Then I will try keeping it stable at other amperes. I should also check this with the voltmeter instead of the ammeter. To check both readings, the resistance of the resistor doesn't decrease like the human body, but it would still be better to check. Fujin began practicing. His control improved slightly. But not much. The lightning was very unstable. Fujin could easily provide the max power continuously, but controlling it at lower levels was challenging. He kept practicing till he had to go on a mission. His team gathered outside the mission center. Tomatis went in and accepted a mission. He came out and said, I accepted a mission to the Land of Frost. Apparently, a family heirloom was stolen. They issued a rank B mission to retrieve it. The opponents will be rogue ninjas from Kumogaku-rei. Fujin, your wind jutsus will be important to counter their lightning release. Fujin nodded. The group made some preparations and left the village. The group traveled across the Land of Fire and the Land of Hot Water to enter the Land of Frost. The journey took a day and a half before they finally reached their destination. Shota 164, a chakra metal sword ice Geki Genkai. The Land of Frost didn't have a ninja force. While they did have some in the past, their army was destroyed in the Second and Third Wars by Kumogaku-rei. Right now, they only had a few ninjas for the protection of the daimyo and the city. All their missions would be issued to Konoha or Kumo. Tomatis briefed Fujin on the details of the Land of Frost en route. Tomatis also warned his group, saying, I don't have the exact information, but I heard some rumors about our ambu squad clashing with some ninjas from the Land of Frost, so keep your guard up in case this mission is a trap. Everyone nodded. They entered the city as soon as they reached it. After going through some formalities, the group was received by an old politician and his bodyguard. Fujin and his group observed their client. He was very old, probably in his 80s, his back seemed to have been bent permanently, and he walked with the help of a walking stick. A samurai acted as his bodyguard. The old man introduced himself. I'm Kanda Kunio. I'm happy to see that Kana has sent a strong group for my mission. Damatis asked, Kanda, are you related to the daimyo? Kanda Kunio smiled and said, looks like you are well informed as well. The current daimyo is my nephew. Damatis said, can you tell us more about the mission? The mission statement didn't have much information. Kunio nodded and said, for generations we had a family heirloom pass through our family. It was a sword made from chakra metal. Unfortunately, we had a break-in last week, and our sword was stolen. We did some investigation and found that the thief was a rogue ninja who was formerly from Kumo. His name is Seigo Rikyu. He used to be a chunin. He became a missing nin 3 years ago. We discovered that he has created an organization and has set up multiple bases in our country. We don't have the ability to track and kill him. As he was speaking, the samurai laid down a map on the table. It was a map of the Land of Frost. It had 5 red crosses. Kunio continued, we have discovered that his organization has these 5 hidden bases, but we don't know which one he is hiding in. We also don't know the exact number and strength of his forces, so your mission is only to retrieve the heirloom. There's no need to kill him or his group. Of course, if you kill him and eliminate his group, that would be the best. You can claim his 2.5 million ryo bounty if he is killed. The Konoha ninjas analyzed the information. There was a lot of information that hadn't been confirmed. The mission could be very risky if stronger ninjas were hiding in the hideouts. Damatis asked, if such a group is operating in your country, why didn't you issue a higher-ranked mission to eliminate them and resolve the issue forever? Kunio didn't reply for a few seconds. He let out a sign and said, it's complicated. Every time we issue a high-ranked mission to clear such a rogue group, another takes its place. It's a never-ending cycle. My nephew decided that as long as they don't kill anyone, we won't spend money to hunt them down. Unfortunately, I don't have the money to issue a higher-ranked mission without getting funds from him. He took out a small book and placed it on the table and said, I reiterate that your mission is just to retrieve the heirloom. However, if you are able to exterminate the rogue group, I will reward you with this book. This book contains research conducted by the previous generation of our ninjas on how to combine water and wind manipulation into ice manipulation. This info shocked the group. They began staring at the book. Fujin thought, you gotta be kidding me. How does a weak country have such a book, and how did he manage to hold on to it? The old man saw the expressions on the faces of Konoha ninjas and said, I would like to clarify that the research is incomplete. Though we tried a lot, none of our ninjas ever learnt Isekeki Genkai. The group calmed down. It made a lot more sense now. They guessed that the Land of Frost would have multiple copies of this book. Damatis said, all right, we will get your heirloom back and investigate the rogue groups as well. Kunio smiled and got up. He said, enjoy your feast. I'll send someone to show you your rooms for the night. He and his samurai bodyguard left. The Konoha group didn't discuss the mission at all. They rested for the night and left the city early in the morning before the sun had risen. After they were a sufficient distance from the city, Ryota asked, what are your thoughts on the mission? Fujin answered first, it is very tricky. We don't know how many are in his organization. We can't even be sure that he is the leader, if he is just a lackey instead of a leader. Then this mission will be very difficult. Damatis nodded and said, you are right, it will be a rank A or even S in that case. Considering the risk involved, focus on your safety first. The mission comes after the safety of our group, so don't be impulsive. Especially you, Tadashi. Tadashi's ninja dog, Kenta, barked in agreement. Tadashi replied, hey, I have enough control over myself. The group ignored him and continued forward. They reached the first hideout. It was a small hill with multiple caves in it. Tadashi said, I don't smell anyone inside the hill. I do smell some scents, but they aren't fresh. Katsumi said, I will send my bugs in to check. He sent a few bugs to investigate the hill. The remaining group stayed a considerable distance away. After some time, even the bugs returned empty-handed. Damatis looked at Fujin. Fujin spread his chakra field and shook his head. I don't sense anyone. Damatis said, all right, let's check the next hideout. The group checked the nearest hideout but didn't find anyone once again, so they moved to the third location. There was a huge waterfall at this location. Apart from the river and some sparse trees around it, the area was open. Ryota asked, where is the hideout here? Tadashi said, I don't smell anyone. Kenta barked in agreement. Fujin asked, should I try to sense right away? Tamata said, "No, let Katsumi check the area first." Fujin nodded. Katsumi's bug scouted the location but didn't find anything either. Fujin spread his chakra field. He didn't pick up any chakra either, but he felt something weird. He looked at the waterfall. Chakra gathered in his eyes as he focused on it. He said, "There is a cave at the bottom of the waterfall, but the entrance is blocked with a wall of rocks which look natural." Tamatis asked, "Do you sense someone hiding there?" Fujin answered, "No, but I have a weird feeling. As if my chakra field can't enter deep into the cave and as if something is trying to hide from my eyes." Ryota asked, "What do you mean?" Fujin said, "During my last mission with Renjuro-sensei, we encountered a squad from Kiri who hid underground perfectly using Fuin Jutsu. I have a feeling that the same might be the case here." As he said that, Fujin thought, "Well, I can't tell that I live in a house that is filled with seals, can I? It has helped in getting familiar with how seals feel when I try to sense them." Hearing Fujin, everyone frowned. Tamata said, "Fuin Jutsu, that's troublesome. Even more troublesome is the fact that they have someone who could be a seal master." He looked at Fujin and asked, "Are you 100% sure that this place is guarded by Fuin Jutsu?" Fujin shook his head. Despite his familiarity with the seals, he still couldn't guarantee. Tamatis asked, "Is there any way we could enter undetected?" Fujin replied, "Unless we have a much superior seal master." "Nope." Tamatis asked, "What would you recommend?" Fujin said, "The best way would be to destroy the cave behind the waterfall. That way, most of them will die inside. We can stay far away and observe who stays alive and comes out. We can decide whether to attack or escape then." Fujin looked at Ryota and asked, "Do you have any earth jutsu that could make the entire waterfall collapse?" Ryota said with a deadpan expression, "Of course not." Tamata said, "None of us has any jutsu." Fujin, "If we enter the cave, would we be ambushed?" Fujin said, "Likely not. The initial part of the cave seems clear. They are probably hiding inside, though I'm not 100% sure." Tamata said, "All right, let's enter the cave then. We will see if there is any way to infiltrate deeper stealthily. If not, we will blow up the whole place with explosives." The group grinned at that idea. The group entered the waterfall. Fujin pointed at one spot and Ryota used a jutsu to create a path. Katsumi first checked the insides with his bugs, and the group stepped in when they confirmed that there were no traps. Chapter 165 Safe Hideout. "What's that?" The Konoha ninjas entered the cave silently and checked it out. There was nothing in the cave. Fujin stood in front of a wall and focused chakra in his eyes. He wouldn't have noticed it a few months back, but due to practicing Fuin Jutsu so much, he could see some seals in the wall. He smirked and thought, "At best the one who made these is a seal master and not a grandmaster. It'd have been difficult to explain how I knew it was a grandmaster and convince these guys to retreat had that been the case. Still, this is a great hideout. For starters, there was nothing around the place that would cause suspicion. This cave itself has 2 layers of camouflage, the waterfall and the wall, one of which is natural and the other is indistinguishable from the natural wall. Even if someone still managed to find this cave, they would think that it is only a small cave and wouldn't suspect a bigger cave inside. Perhaps the only vulnerability of this hideout is the ones hiding inside it. If they didn't leave any trail, it'd be almost impossible for the Land of Frost forces to find this place suspicious." Fujin said, "I think they are behind this wall." Tamatas nodded. The whole group planted a few dozen explosives on that wall. Fujin and Ryota used Earth military movement jutsu to enter the cave walls and planted over 400 explosion tags where Fujin asked them to. As Fujin could see the seals, the rogue ninjas who were hiding inside weren't alerted. Fujin's squad left the waterfall and moved a few hundred meters away. Tamatas asked, "Is everyone ready?" The group nodded. Everyone made a hand sign. Tamatas picked up a stone and said, "We will set off the explosion when this stone touches the ground." He tossed the stone in the air. At the moment it touched the ground, all 5 ninjas activated the explosion tags they planted. Inside the cave, there were 14 rogue ninjas. They were aware that the Land of Frost would try to find them, perhaps even issue a mission. But they weren't worried. They had recently stocked up their supplies and were planning to hide there for a month or more. In the cave, Nishio Korenaga was trying out the chakra sword. He held the sword in his right hand and tried to extend his chakra through the sword. The chakra flowed through the sword very smoothly. He felt as if the sword was an extension of his own arm. Suddenly, the chakra flowing through the sword was converted into lightning in the blink of an eye. Almost all of the other rogue ninjas were watching this. They were surprised at how skilled Koranaga was. Seigo Rikyu said, "Damn boss, you are on fire. It's as if the sword was crafted for you." However, Koranaga shook his head and said, "No, you have done a great job. This sword is amazing. I am surprised that this weak little nation had something so good." Rikyu grinned and said, "It was their family heirloom. They might still have some good stuff that we can try to steal." Koranaga nodded and said, "Yes, I'm interested too, but not now. They might have issued a rank mission to Konoha or our former village to hunt you down." Rikyu immediately got serious and said, "Yes, they must be hunting for me now." Koranaga smirked and said, "Don't worry. As long as you are loyal to me, I will guarantee your safety. Besides, those Morans don't know about me, even if they manage to track this hideout. They will just feed my new sword." Hearing him, everyone calmed down and began cheering. After all, Koranaga was the true leader of this group of misfits. The investigation carried out by the Land of Frost ninjas never discovered him, so their information was incomplete. And this incomplete information could very well be fatal. As the rogue ninjas were celebrating, the explosion tags began exploding, the entire hidden cave began shaking. They didn't understand what exactly was happening. One of them yelled, "What the fuck is happening? Did an earthquake hit us?" Another one of the ninjas had his eyes closed as he sensed. His name was Fumikyo Mokwamiya. He was a rogue ninja from the Land of Water and was a seal master. He said, "Someone has planted hundreds of explosions around our cave. Take cover immediately." Everyone began using defensive jutsus. However, the number of explosions was too high. The cave soon crumbled. Rocks rained down upon them. The ground under them began collapsing. Explosion tags began exploding very close to them. All the large-scale defensive jutsus were torn down, leaving every man for himself. The explosions also disabled all seals. The Konoha ninjas could now use their senses to observe the ones hiding inside. Fujin was the first one to speak. His voice was very serious as he said, "There is a Junin among them. Their total number is 14. Everyone is at least a Chunin." The entire group became very serious. A Junin from Kumo along with 13 Chunings would be very difficult to handle. Tamata said, "Let's pay attention from a distance and see how many survive. I will decide whether to attack or retreat." He looked at Katsumi, who nodded his head. The explosions broke all the cave walls. Water from the waterfall began pouring into it and submerging the entire cave. The rogue ninjas who were struggling with explosions, debris and unstable footing suddenly had to deal with a strong water wave as well. Koranaga grabbed Rikyu and began making his way out of the cave through the water. Mokwamiya created a barrier around himself and began making his way out as well. In all, the explosions killed 3, another 5 were killed when rocks fell on them, and 1 more was killed due to suffocating underwater. The 5 who made it out had some injuries on them. Only Mokwamiya and Koranaga were completely fine. They expected to be ambushed as soon as they got out. However, there was no attack. Instead, there was another trap for them. Katsumi had some of his bugs move along the water that flooded the cave. These bugs could survive underwater and were very poisonous. They managed to bite all except Mokwamiya, who was protected by a barrier. As soon as they landed outside the waterfall, their legs began shaking. Koranaga said, "Fuck, I'm poisoned." He looked around to see 3 more being in the same situation as he was. He looked at Mokwamiya, who wasn't even a bit hurt, and yelled, "Bastard, did you betray us?" Mokwamiya quickly defended himself. "I have done no such thing." Koranaga didn't trust him and said, "First we were attacked despite your seals, and now all but you are poisoned. How would you explain that?" Koranaga unsheathed his chakra sword as he spoke. However, he didn't attack and instead kept his attention on an incoming ambush. Seeing that they wouldn't clash, the Konoha ninjas made a move. Tamata said, "I will take on the Junin. Ryota, take on the unharmed guy. Others finish off the rest and come to help us." The group nodded and flickered. The rogue ninjas noticed them and prepared for a fight. Mokwamiya said, "They are Konoha ninjas. Perhaps you 4 were poisoned by bugs. They couldn't poison me due to my barrier." Koranaga snorted and focused on the Konoha ninjas. The Konoha group flickered until they were just 20 meters from the enemy. Fujin was at the center. Tamatis and Tadashi were on both his sides and both had made hand signs. Fire release great fireball jutsu at the same time. Fujin used infinite breakthrough jutsu, the 3 jutsus combined creating a massive firestorm. While their missions over the last couple of months weren't challenging, Fujin did improve his teamwork alongside the group a lot. The rogue ninjas were surprised by the huge firestorm heading for them. Koranaga yelled, "Get underwater." The rogue ninjas immediately dove into the river they were standing on. Ryota, Tadashi and Tomatis followed them underwater. Katsumi didn't join them as most of his bugs were ineffective underwater, while Fujin didn't go as he didn't want to face an experienced lightning user underwater. Under the water, Koranaga saw the Konoha ninjas following him. He immediately became angry. Are they dare to fight me underwater? He made hand signs. Lightning release false darkness. He released a spear of lightning from his mouth at Tomatis. Tomatis watched the incoming lightning spear with a grim expression as he thought, I didn't expect him to use such a strong jutsu, despite being poisoned. He threw a kunai with an explosion tag at the incoming spear. It exploded right before reaching the spear. The explosion dispersed the spear. However, since they were underwater, the current began spreading through the entire area. The Konoha ninjas as well as the rogues were electrocuted. Among the rogues, 3 had an affinity to the lightning element. They were fine. While Mokwamiya once again insulated himself with the help of seals, only 1 rogue was shocked. On the side of the Konoha ninjas, all the 3 who went underwater and the dog were shocked. Though it didn't injure them, the shock had a paralytic effect on them and hindered their movement. They immediately began exiting the water. Their advantage had been reversed with a single jutsu. Chapter 166 The Hunt Begins. The immediate reversal lifted the spirits of the rogue ninjas. They began making hand signs to use more lightning jutsus. However, Koranaga was frowning. My entire body is hurting. This poison is very troublesome. We will need to win this fight or escape successfully within 5 minutes. Otherwise, we all might die here. While the rogue ninjas were making hand signs, someone watched them like a hawk. Fujin's eyes were glowing as he watched the only rogue ninja who got shocked. Vacuum cores began forming in his mouth. He shot 2 vacuum bullets at the same time. During the last 2 months of training, Fujin had finally learnt to use 2 vacuum bullets at the same time. 1 vacuum bullet was shot at Koranaga, while the other was shot at the paralyzed rogue. Koranaga noticed the attack and immediately moved out of the way while weaving hand signs. However, there was another ninja just behind him who didn't notice the attack. The bullet hit his right thigh and pierced through it. As for the paralyzed rogue, the vacuum bullet pierced through his head and killed him. The deadly attack shocked them once again and reminded them of the seriousness of the situation. Koranaga launched false darkness once again. This time it was aimed at Fujin. Fujin noticed it and used vacuum bullet jutsu once again and shot 2 bullets at the incoming lightning spear. His bullets tore through the lightning spear and dispersed it. Koranaga had to dodge them once again. He frowned. Wind user, things just keep getting worse. Tomatis, Tadashi, Ryota and Kenta exited the water. Katsumi helped them to get on the shore. All breathed heavily. Tadashi gritted his teeth and complained, shit, that bastard is strong. Ryota agreed. Yeah, and the lightning element restricts me too much. Luckily Tomatis at least neutralized it. Otherwise we might have been in a lot of trouble. Tomatis said, though our movement will be hindered a bit. They are poisoned by Katsumi's bugs. We just have to hold on for around 5 minutes and they will begin losing their ability to move. Katsumi nodded and said, 4 more minutes left. It will be best if they escape. That way we can just hunt down their unconscious or dead bodies. Fujin noticed that all his team were on the shore. The rogue ninjas who were under the water were approaching him. And the seal master from the group was weaving hand signs for a water jutsu. Not wanting to be surrounded, he flickered to his team. When he reached them, he heard Katsumi softly whispering, focus on stalling them. It's fine if they escape. A second after he flickered, a water dragon formed where he was standing. The rogue group exited the river and stood behind the water dragon. As soon as they exited the river, Katsumi's bugs attacked them. His bugs had already spread over the river and swarmed them. The rogues had noticed the bugs when they were underwater. They immediately launched explosion tags on them. Mokwamiya launched his water dragon at the Konoha ninjas. However, Fujin countered with a giant ball of wind. It hit the water dragon's head and exploded, neutralizing it. Fujin followed it up with a dozen air bullets. However, the enemy managed to dodge. The Konoha ninjas who were electrocuted earlier stood up on their feet. However, their movement wasn't very fluent. Koranaga observed their movements. He analyzed. We could attack and try to kill them, but the wind user will be tough to overcome. He can keep neutralizing our jutsus and keep us at a distance. Every second that he stalls will be lethal for us, while that bug user is probably responsible for our poison. His bugs are an even bigger threat than the wind user. We should escape while their mobility is hampered. No, I should. Without saying anything, Koranaga suddenly flickered away. Mokwamiya had expected him to do this and flickered away as well. The other 2 were shocked. However, within a second they tried escaping as well. Fujin was surprised at how they suddenly ran away. He thought, wow, that leader just abandoned them and ran. He made a hand sign. A shadow clone with 10% of his chakra appeared. He flickered immediately. Just 2 flickers, and he appeared behind the rogue who was running away on 1 foot. The rogue ninja noticed him and threw a few shurikens at him and began weaving hand signs. However, the clone dodged all shurikens with extreme ease. A sword appeared in his hand and he swung the sword at the enemy. Realizing the threat, the rogue ninja moved backwards. However, a sword slash was released from the sword. The clone watched as the enemy's head was split from his neck. While the clone was fighting, Fujin created another shadow clone and 10 wind clones, which chased after the remaining 3. After finishing off his opponent, the first clone also joined the chase. Tomatis looked at it and said, "Good work." Fujin nodded and asked Katsumi, "Did you plant your bugs on them?" Katsumi nodded and said, "Well, except the guy who used the water jutsu, they are poisoned as well." Fujin and Katsumi stayed on guard while the others warmed up to get rid of any issues they might have in moving around. After a couple of minutes, they began chasing. Fujin said, "The one who was injured is dead. The others are escaping in different directions." Tomatis looked at Katsumi, who told them the exact locations. He instructed, "All right, Fujin and Tadashi will hunt Saigo Rikyu. The rest of us will hunt that Junin. Ignore the third ninja for now." Everyone nodded and split off. Fujin analyzed. "Good decision. The main mission is to retrieve the sword, while the additional rewards are basically for bringing Rikyu's head, and with the enemy poisoned, they just need to wait until that Junin to just die by himself." Kurenaga and Rikyu quickly began consuming the antidotes they had. They had a general use antidote that could neutralize the poisons of the bugs from the Iburumi clan. Their situation improved slightly. The pain and dizziness they were experiencing began decreasing. Both smiled. The speed of Fujin's clones was much faster than theirs. His clones began catching up with the enemies. The wind clones chasing Rikyu were the first ones to catch up. Rikyu turned around to see 3 wind clones chasing him. He thought, "Wind clones? So annoying." He began weaving hand signs while escaping. The wind clones knew that they wouldn't be able to defeat him, so they only focused on stalling him. Rikyu turned around and used the jutsu he prepared. Lightning released discharge jutsu. He extended his palms ahead. Lightning appeared on his palms and was launched towards the clone. However, instead of it moving at a rapid speed, it moved slowly and instead spread in all directions. The eyes of the clones widened as they retreated. They thought, "A low-damage AoE jutsu. It's perfect for dealing with clones." As the lightning discharge approached the clones, one of the clones stepped forward and poured all his chakra into a great breakthrough jutsu. The winds neutralized all the discharge and instead attacked Rikyu. However, after using the jutsu, Rikyu had already started running. The remaining 2 clones began chasing after him. Mokwamiya was the next one to clash with the clones. Unlike Rikyu, he waited on top of a small lake for the clones to catch up. As soon as the clones appeared in sight, he began making hand signs. He thought, "I could have hidden perfectly. Unfortunately, this kid is a sensor. He would have figured out the general area, and I would be trapped. I have to finish the clones before the ninjas begin sensing me as well." 1 shadow clone and 3 wind clones approached him and noticed him weaving hand signs. Water release raging waves. Mokwamiya spat out water in all directions. Just like Rikyu, his aim too was to use a wide-range attack to dispel the clones. One of the wind clones again moved forward and used all his chakra to use an infinite breakthrough jutsu to nullify the enemy jutsu. The wind clashed with the water and sent the water back to Mokwamiya. The remaining clones flickered to close the distance while preparing a jutsu. Wind release air bullet jutsu. All 3 clones used air bullet jutsu at the same time. The shadow clone aimed his bullets at Mokwamiya, while the wind clones cut off his escape routes. However, Mokwamiya stood his ground. A barrier appeared around him. The air bullets hit the barrier and were stopped. The shadow clone observed him carefully. He analyzed. Impressive. His speed at creating barriers is very fast. I should study barriers properly. They provide a very strong defense. That said, he is lucky that I can't use vacuum jutsus with a clone yet, else he might have died despite the barrier. Behind the barrier, Mokwamiya was rapidly weaving hand signs. His chakra suddenly flared. The winds from the infinite breakthrough jutsu had died down. Water once again began gathering around him. Water release piercing rain jutsu. The water formed a sphere around him. The surface of the water sphere began forming spikes. Soon, innumerable water needles were shot in all directions at a high speed. Chapter 167. A false sense of security. The wind clones tried dodging the incoming water needles, but there was no room as they were too densely packed. The shadow clone escaped underground. Mokwamiya weaved more hand signs and slammed his hands on the lake. Water release corrosive liquid jutsu. The water from the lake began spreading above the ground for hundreds of meters. This water was corrosive and harmful. If it came in contact with a ninja, it would begin feeling an itch over their body. However, if it hit a clone, the clone would be dispelled. Mokwamiya observed as he thought, though we made this jutsu to counter the ninjas who hide underwater, it also works for those who hide underground. Now that clone will be trapped there. He began planning his escape. Meanwhile, Fujin's clone frowned. He thought, what a troublesome opponent. He managed to neutralize my clones very easily. Still, all his fighting plans are based on the assumption that I don't know lightning jutsus. A strong current through the water will reverse the battle situation. Unfortunately, I have to keep it hidden. The clone made a hand sign. A wind clone appeared behind it, containing half his chakra. The remaining half of his chakra gathered on the clone's fist. He punched the ground above him diagonally. A shockwave was sent through the ground. It hit the underwater walls of the lake and sent stones flying at Mokwamiya, who had just relaxed his guard slightly. Round 4-5 stones hit him. Unfortunately, the speed of the stones wasn't fast enough to make them lethal. Their speed was further reduced by the water. Though the stones barely hurt him, his instincts were screaming. He quickly made a barrier in the direction from where the stones came. The shadow clone's punch had created a small but linear hole. The wind clone used infinite breakthrough jutsu and poured all its chakra into it. However, unlike the usual infinite breakthrough jutsu that spread for dozens, even hundreds of meters wide, this one traveled in a narrow hole. It almost looked like a wind spear. The wind jutsu hit the barrier hard, as the impact was only on a small area. The entire barrier was pushed back. Mokwamiya controlled the barrier and made it turn slightly to divert the direction of the jutsu. However, the wind spear pierced through the barrier. Fortunately, he managed to change the direction slightly. The spear passed through the side of his abdomen, cutting a half-inch semispiral through his right side. Mokwamiya watched in shock as the left side of his abdomen began bleeding profusely. He thought, who the fuck is that kid, and which jutsus did he use to do something like this? However, he stopped thinking about Fujin and began thinking about his own vulnerable situation. They have an Inuzuka. He will smell my blood. Hiding has become 100 times more difficult now. He removed all his clothes as they all had some blood on them. He used the water to clean the wound. Once the wound was cleaned, he lit a fire and burned the wound to stop the bleeding. He gritted his teeth due to the pain. The fire cauterized the wound and stopped bleeding. He applied some bandages over the burned area and made a hand sign. 4 water clones appeared around him. Each of them picked up some of the bloody clothes and ran in different directions. Mokwamiya ran in another direction without bothering to wear any clothes. He ensured that he left no trail behind. After moving some distance, he hid underground and used seals to hide properly. The last set of clones clashed with Korenaga, but they were defeated promptly. Fujin, who was chasing Rikyu, received the memories of his 2 shadow clones. He analyzed. These guys are tough. I don't think this mission is rank B anymore. Rikyu also managed to dispel the last 2 wind clones. They were escaping with confidence when something happened. Both Rikyu and Korenaga suddenly lost their footing. They fell to the ground and vomited blood. Both were shocked. What the heck? What happened? Did I get poisoned again? How? Both were confused. They didn't understand. Other than Katsumi, the remaining Konoha ninjas were also in the dark about this. They were aware that the rogue ninjas were poisoned. However, they never saw the rogue ninjas use antidotes. The sudden flaring of the poison in Rikyu and Korenaga was a hidden strategy of the Aburumi clan. The entire clan used the same bug to poison the enemies. Hence, every major village had ready-made antidotes available for that poison. However, in reality, the Aburumi clan had a large variety of poisonous bugs. One of those bugs had poison similar to the normal poisonous bugs. However, instead of being neutralized by the antidote, it would be temporarily suppressed and flare up a few minutes later. The Aburumi clan keeps this a secret by only using it against enemies when they are confident that they will kill the enemies. Otherwise, they wouldn't use it. Due to this reason, no one was aware of this. And due to this reason, the Aburumi clan would always be considered a clan that Konoha's enemies hated to fight during wars. Rikyu and Korenaga stopped escaping and tried to inspect themselves. They both speculated that they were poisoned with a different poison, so their antidote wasn't effective. However, even after speculating correctly, they couldn't do anything about it. Rikyu decided to stop escaping and hid behind a tree as it was very difficult for him to move. On the other hand, Korenaga turned around and rushed back to where the Konoha ninjas were. Round half a minute later, Kuranaga encountered Tamatis, Katsumi and Ryota. A vicious look could be seen in his eyes as he looked at Katsumi. He threatened, "Give me the antidote for your poison. If not, I will kill you all." Tamatis chuckled and asked, "Do you really think that we would just hand you the antidote?" However, he and Ryota were on alert. They had the same thought. Why did he escape if he didn't have the antidote? Did he set up any trap here? Unlike them, Katsumi wasn't that worried. They began fighting. Fujin and Tadashi caught up with Rikyu as well. His blood was very easy to smell for Rikyu. While Fujin could sense him when they entered in range, they stealthily approached him from behind. They could hear him coughing. Tadashi grabbed a shuriken that had a string attached to it. He threw it around the tree from behind. It went around the tree and trapped Rikyu. Though Rikyu had stopped moving, his condition worsened. He vomited blood multiple times. Even moving had become difficult. Tears had formed in his eyes as he realized that he would die in that unknown place. He saw the shuriken and the string. But it was too late. He didn't have any energy to move. The string tied him to the tree. He tried struggling, however 2 vacuum bullets hit him. One pierced his heart and the other pierced his neck. He died without troubling Fujin and Tadashi much. Tadashi said, "That was easy." Fujin nodded. "Yeah, Katsumi's poison is very strong." Tadashi grinned and said, "Yeah, it is. He bailed us out multiple times thanks to it." He went forward and stored Rikyu's body in a scroll. They began moving towards Tamatis and company. Tadashi asked, "Any idea what's happening at other places?" Fujin shook his head and said, "No, they are both strong. They managed to defeat my clones. I think my clones managed to injure that water user, but I'm not sure." Tadashi replied, "All right, anyways, that Junin is also poisoned. So Tamatis and others should be able to win easily." Fujin nodded. They moved quickly and arrived where Kuranaga was fighting in a few minutes. The scene surprised them. Tadashi quickly rushed towards Tamatis and Katsumi and asked, "Are you guys fine?" Fujin also followed him. Both were bleeding. Katsumi's left leg was dyed in blood. Tamatis's right arm also seemed to be bleeding in multiple spots. Kuranaga's dead body was lying a few meters away from them. Tamatis said, "It's fine. He was stronger than we expected, and the poison made him very desperate." They began applying first aid to them. Katsumi's left leg had multiple nails embedded in it. Kuranaga had charged the nails with lightning and used them to attack from range, as Katsumi always maintained a distance from him. Meanwhile, since Kuranaga was targeting Katsumi, Tamatis decided to engage him at close range. That resulted in 2 long and deep slashes on his right arm with the chakra sword. While applying first aid, Ryota said, "This guy was very strong, especially with the chakra sword. It's lucky that he was poisoned. Else we might have been in severe trouble." Tamatis agreed. "Yeah, I thought I could take on him. Unfortunately, he was stronger." While the first aid was being applied, a few of Katsumi's bugs were moving inside Kuranaga's dead body. They were cleaning all traces of the poison in his body. Due to this, if anyone inspects his dead body, no one would find the poison that was used. Hence, they won't be able to make the antidote. All Aburumi clan ninjas who used this poison would use this method to keep their poisons a secret, if they weren't sure about the kill and the fact that they would get access to their dead bodies first. They would only use the normal poisonous bugs. Chapter 168. A new team. After removing all traces of the poison, the bugs left the dead body and returned to Katsumi. Ryota had finished applying the first aid and he sealed Kuranaga's body in a scroll. Ryota said, "He is sure to have a good bounty." Fujin picked up the chakra sword and said, "I don't think it would compare with this sword though." He began flowing his chakra through the sword and changed its nature to wind. He was surprised. "Wow, so smooth. I thought my swords were good. This one is probably better than the one Hirizen asked to be made for me." Noticing that Fujin's attention was on the sword, Tamatis coughed and said, "That's our mission requirement, Fujin." Fujin looked back and chuckled. "I know, just saying, haha," he thought. "Oh well, if I need such a sword in the future and I can't get it any other way, I can just steal this sword from that old guy. It's not like he would ever use it anyways." Since Katsumi and Tamatis were injured, they decided not to hunt that last rogue ninja. The group began returning. Katsumi couldn't walk properly, so he rode on Kenta. They returned the chakra sword to Kondai Kunio. Understanding the difficulty of the mission, Kunio increased the mission ranking from B to A and increased the mission rewards to 2 million ryo. He handed them the book that had theories and research on learning the Ice Keki Genkai and made the arrangements to help them claim the bounties. He also invited their medical ninjas to treat Katsumi and Tamatis. Tamatis's wound healed properly. They bandaged his arm. It would leave 2 scars on his arm, but he didn't mind it. Katsumi's injuries, however, were serious. He was wounded down to the bone. They healed him as well as they could. The healer said, "That's as much as we could do. Your village has the best healers. So I would recommend you to get treated by them as well. Also, I would recommend you take a few months break." Katsumi nodded and thanked them. They rested in the land of frost for some time. In this period, they went through the ice release book. Fujin was the first one to read. He analyzed. This book is good. It contains research of over a dozen ninjas, and still none of them managed to create the ice element. Kinda shows how tough creating a Keki Genkai will be, though I don't have the water affinity needed for the ice element. This book could give some insights if I try to create scorch or magnet elements. The others read the book as well. Only Ryota and Tamatis were interested in a Keki Genkai, and neither had the wind or the water element, so after reading carefully, the book was given to Fujin for keeping. After resting for a couple of days, they began moving back to Konoha. Their speed was a bit slower as they had to ensure that Katsumi didn't strain his leg. He rode on Kenta the entire journey. He was admitted to Konoha's hospital after returning. The group decided to meet after 2 days in the hospital. Fujin continued his training to improve his control over the lightning element. He brought some fruits and visited the hospital at the decided time. Others had already gathered. Fujin placed the fruits on the table next to Katsumi and asked, "How is your leg?" He said, "It has been treated properly. Unfortunately, I have to rest for a couple of months for the damage to the bones to be healed and for the bone to become strong once again." Fujin replied, "Oh, that's bad. I'm glad that there are no permanent injuries though." "Take a good break," Katsumi nodded. Tamata said, "I have something to discuss." The entire team looked at him. Tamata said, "We have been taking missions continuously for quite a long time. I was thinking that it would be best for our team to take a few months off. I was thinking about a 3-month-long break." The group was surprised. Tadashi asked, 3 whole months?" Tamatis nodded. He said, "Along with missions, it's also important to build up your strength. Take these 3 months to train newer skills or master the old ones further. In that time, Katsumi will also get healed, so we won't have any issues with team composition. Also, we do need a break from the missions." The group began analyzing. Ryota, Tadashi and Katsumi were thinking about the things they could learn in the 3 months. Meanwhile, Fujin thought, "Seriously, another 3 months break? I didn't think completing 50 rank B missions would be so challenging." As no one spoke anything, Tamatis said, "The last mission gave all of us 2.5 million ryo, so we shouldn't have any monetary issues. Once we get stronger, we could try to do tougher missions more frequently. A substantial increase in strength could improve your chances to become elite chunings or even a special junin." The prospect of promotion excited them slightly. I agreed. Tamatis looked at Fujin, who hadn't said anything yet. He said, "Fujin, your strength is already very high. Perhaps if we had you in the team that faced Koranaga, we might have killed him without taking any injuries, and I understand that you may want to take multiple rank B missions to reach close to the 50 missions mark." Fujin nodded. Tamatis continued, "If you want to, you can form or join other teams in this time period. But we would love it if you join us again after 3 months. But we would understand if you don't." Fujin smiled and said, "You are thinking too much, Tamatis. I'll be back in this team." Tamatis and others smiled. The group talked for a bit before leaving. Fujin thought, "Now I have to find a new team again. Though this may not be all bad, I should try to form a new team, a younger team that would want to take continuous missions. That way, we could reach the 50 mission criteria soon. If I get promoted to Elite Chunin, my sword and sensor skills would get me promoted to Special Chunin rank too. Then I could join teams that do rank A or even rank S missions. Still, doing more missions would mean getting less time for training." For what to do, Fujin analyzed his situation. In the end, he almost pulled his hair as he couldn't decide. He thought, this is so fucking confusing. Missions give me combat experience that no amount of training would provide me. On the other hand, training will increase my strength and skills, which would be useful for missions. Fuck it. I'll first master the control over the lightning element. Then I'll try forming the team and doing a month or 2 of non-stop missions. For the next 10 days, Fujin devoted the majority of his time to mastering his control over the lightning element. He practiced with 10 shadow clones at all times. Finally, he sighed in relief. "Finally done. I can freely control the electric current from 10 mA to 10.5 amperes. I can also control voltage from 200 volts to 840,000 volts. Time to head for missions." He left his basement. He was about to send clones when he heard his doorbell. He opened the door to see Miko. His eyes involuntarily twitched as he thought, I was just about to send a clone to her. He waved his hand and asked, "What's up?" Miko entered his house and asked, "Do you have any missions lined up?" Fujin shook his head and said, "No, my team just took a break." Her eyes sparkled. She said, "Great, I am recommending you to my team." Fujin observed her carefully. He asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "I was assigned to a team that is planning to undertake a Rank A mission. Unfortunately, the member that specializes in wind jutsus is injured, and we need a replacement to take that mission. So I recommended you to my team. Come with me." Fujin locked his home and followed her. He asked, "They just agreed?" She sighed and said, "No, I had to convince them a lot. The injured guy is a Junin. But they couldn't find any other option. So they had to accept my recommendation." Fujin nodded. He knew that wind users were too rare in Konoha. Not a single clan specialized in the wind element. He said, "Actually, I was about to look for you too." She looked back at him and asked, "Why?" He said, "My team has taken a 3-month-long break. I was thinking about forming a team with you, Teru and Hoka to undertake Rank B missions continuously. We could undertake 15-20 Rank B missions in around 2 months. It would help us secure the elite Chunin promotion quicker." Miko's eyes widened. She asked, 15-20 Rank B missions in 2 months? I only do 3 every month." Fujin nodded and said, "Most Rank B missions are very easy. We could focus on doing missions that take less time to complete and are easier. Unless the mission gets upgraded to Rank A, we should be able to complete it with ease. Once we get the elite Chunin promotion, the promotion to Special Junin wouldn't be far, so we can start taking Rank A and even S missions." The thought of undertaking Rank S missions excited Miko. She said, "All right, let's do it after this mission." Fujin smiled and said, "Great, I'll try to convince Hoka and Teru after this mission." Miko said, "I'll join you." Fujin said, "That will be helpful." The two reached the Uchiha compound. Miko led Fujin to a house where her team was gathered. Chapter 169 Missing Children. As soon as Fujin entered the room, he saw 6 Uchihas looking at him. He thought, "Oh, I forgot that her squad is an all-Uchiha squad. I hope that it doesn't attract any unwanted attention." Among the 6 Uchihas, 3 seemed to be in their 30s, 2 in their 20s, and the last one was just a year older than Fujin. One of them said, "So this is Fujin? Not bad. His chakra is quite high for his age." Fujin wondered, He can tell chakra without using his eyes or sensing." Miko said, "Yes, Uncle Akihiko." She looked at Fujin and said, "Fujin, this is Uncle Akihiko. Just like Sensei, he is an elite Junin too. He will be heading this mission." Fujin nodded and respectfully said, "Pleased to meet you, Okehiko-san." Uchiha Okehiko smiled and said, "No need to be formal, Fujin. You can call me uncle as well." Fujin replied with a smile, "All right, Uncle Akihiko." While he was speaking, he thought, "Not bad. I was afraid that all of them would be arrogant to the core." At that moment, the Uchiha, who was slightly older than Fujin, scoffed and said, "Miko, are you sure that he is strong? We don't want any slackers joining us. Besides, can he really replace Uncle Tianausko?" Fujin looked at him and thought, "Never mind, I concluded too soon." Miko rebuked him, "Shunko, you can't even defeat me. Fujin is even stronger than me." Okihiko calmed the kids down. "Calm down. Shunko, learn to work with your teammates. And Miko, don't insult your teammates." Fujin, "Don't mind Shunko." Fujin nodded. There wasn't much change in his expression, but he was surprised. "Tutiv thought that she would admit that she was weaker than me." Akihiko asked, "Miko, you and Fujin can do the fire-wind combination jutsu, right?" Miko and Fujin nodded. Akihiko said, "All right, Tianauska could do the fire-wind combination jutsu with all 3 of us. But that was due to us taking missions together for years. We won't be able to reach the same efficiency with Fujin in this little time. So this combination jutsu will be left to you guys." Miko grinned and replied, "Don't worry, we got it," Akihiko said. "The mission is an emergency. It is a Rank A mission issued by Kasagaka. Over 100 kids younger than the age of 6 have suddenly gone missing, and all their attempts at investigation have failed. Instead, some of the search teams have gone missing as well. Our mission is to investigate this event and rescue those kids. We will leave the village in 30 minutes. Gather your supplies and weapons and meet at the village gate as soon as you can." Everyone nodded and left. Miko looked at Fujin and guessed, "You are carrying all the supplies that you need?" Fujin nodded. "Yup. What about you? Miko grinned and said, same here, let's race to the gate. She flickered before Fujin could reply. Fujin sighed and flickered as well. He very quickly caught up with Miko and commented softly, why do you arrange a competition that you have no chance of winning? He overtook Miko but didn't create a huge difference between them. Miko snorted at his confidence. She tried hard to catch up, but Fujin's physique as well as the mastery of body flicker jutsu was better than hers. Fujin reached the village gate, however. He wasn't the first one there. Okihiko and the other two older Uchihas were already at the gate. Miko reached a few seconds after Fujin. The three senior Uchiha saw them. One of them smirked and said, looks like both of you lost the race. Miko was annoyed by his smirk and taunt. But at the same time, she was happy that Fujin lost too, so she didn't complain and looked at Fujin with a smirk. Fujin shrugged his hands and asked, aren't you too old to be racing with preteens, mister? His smirk immediately fell, while the other two laughed at his expense. Miko introduced them. Fujin, he is Uncle Masaru. He likes teasing young kids, and he is Uncle Sora. Masaru immediately said in embarrassment, hey, don't speak nonsense. Meanwhile, Fujin wondered, is this entire world filled with pedos? Miko laughed at his reaction. Okihiko said, don't mind him, Fujin. He is very competitive and playful. Anyways, are you two ready? We will be moving at a full speed. We will only rest once before reaching Kusa. Both Miko and Fujin nodded. In 5 minutes, the remaining 3 members arrived. The 8-member squad left immediately at full speed. They traveled without resting until they reached the border between Konoha and Kusa. They took a break at a border patrol camp in the Land of Fire so that all could rest at the same time without any worries about external threats. The next morning, they continued their journey and reached Kasagaka a few hours after noon. On reaching, Fujin thought, I don't recall much about Kasagaka. I only remember Karin and her mother. I wonder if there are any others of significance from this village. Fujin slowed down as they neared the gate, but the others didn't. Fujin was confused and increased his pace. A couple of guards guarded the village gate. They noticed a few ninjas moving towards them at high speed and got alert. They were already on edge due to the cases of missing kids. Okihiko and Sora activated their Sharingans. Sharingan Genjutsu. Both guards were placed under a Genjutsu. They collapsed. Fujin was speechless. He thought, what the fuck? And I thought that this guy was normal. Okihiko said, Masaru, stay here with the kids and interrogate them. Others, follow me. Okihiko, Sora and 2 others went inside the village. Masaru, Fujin, Miko and Shunko stayed back. Masaru said, I will release the Genjutsu on them. Miko and Shinko, you cast a new Genjutsu on them and interrogate them. I will observe. They nodded and stepped forward. Masaru made a hand sign and released the Genjutsu. The guards woke up but were confused. Miko and Shunko casted new Genjutsu on them. They asked basic questions and some tricky questions. Unfortunately, the guards didn't know anything. They were innocent. Their actions were noticed by the villagers. Seeing their guards being subdued caused panic among the villagers. A few ninjas stepped forward, but Masaru said, we have been assigned the mission to recover the missing children. This is a part of the mission. Stay back. Hearing that, the ninjas didn't come very close. However, they stayed in their position and observed the actions of Konoha ninjas. Many of them were unhappy. A few thought, the Uchiha clan, they are so fucking arrogant. Under normal circumstances, they would have lashed out, but the missing children had put them on an edge. They gritted their teeth and endured the humiliation. While the interrogation was on, Okihiko's group entered the central building in the village. They were quickly led to the room hosting the leader of Kasagaka and the daimyo. The current leader of Kasagaka was Ashikaga Hiroshi. He said, welcome to Kasagaka, Uchiha Okihiko. I am glad that you arrived so quickly. Okihiko nodded and said, it is an emergency after all. Can you brief me on all the details of this mission? We will begin investigations immediately. Hiroshi nodded and said, until now, 176 kids have been reported missing. There isn't anything common between these children, other than the fact that they are aged between 2 and 6. Round 12 went missing from this village itself. The remaining went missing from civilian villages across this country. He let down a map on the table. The map had locations of villages and the number of children missing from each village. In all, they went missing from 7 more villages, and all these 7 villages were the villages closest to Kasagaka. Okihiko observed the map and asked, where did you investigate and what were the results of it? Hiroshi answered, we didn't find anything. He began marking locations on the map and said, we have investigated all these areas but didn't find any clues. Instead, in this location, we lost 3 rescue teams. We send a huge force to investigate it. but didn't find anything. It's as if they have disappeared from the face of the earth. Akihiko and the other Uchihas frowned. This case was very tricky. They didn't say anything and kept observing the map to see if they could decipher any patterns. Hiroshi and the daimyo didn't disturb them. After a few minutes, a knock was heard on the door. Without waiting for any response, the door was opened and a man stepped in. He said, "Lord Daimyo, Lord Hiroshi, there are unk." As he was speaking, his eyes went to the Konoha ninjas in the room. He instantly stopped talking. Hiroshi was confused. He said, "Keep going." The man said, "The guards on the gate are being interrogated by a few Konoha ninjas." Before Hiroshi could say anything, Akihiko said without taking his eyes off the map, "Don't worry. They are my subordinates." Hiroshi was speechless. He asked, "What do you mean, don't worry?" Akihiko said, "The children went missing from your village. No one is more suspicious than the guards. Don't worry, we won't ask for any personal or confidential information. But they have to be interrogated. I hope you can bring me the other guards as well to interrogate." Akihiko's tough stance intimidated Hiroshi. He said, "All right." He commanded the man who delivered the message to gather the remaining guards. Chapter 170, a difficult task. Akihiko's group couldn't find anything substantial on the map. They took the map and decided on a few locations to investigate. They also checked a file containing information about all the missing children, but didn't find anything else. They first interrogated all the guards. But all guards were innocent, so the Konoha group left the village. The guards were very dissatisfied with being treated in such a manner. Hiroshi said, "I apologize for what just happened, but I hope that you guys understand the severity of the situation and the concerns of the Konoha team. They came here less than 2 days after issuing the mission and left without even resting, so I hope that you forgive them." Hearing that, the faces of the guards softened a bit. They all noticed that the Konoha ninjas seemed tired from traveling and still didn't take any rest. Elsewhere, Fujin's team was moving rapidly. Shunko asked, "We have no clues at all. How are we going to investigate?" Masaru answered, "Almost a couple hundred children have gone missing. No matter how good the kidnappers are, they will leave some clues behind. We just have to search until we find one." Akihiko nodded. "We will start where the 3 rescue squads went missing. That place should have the highest chance of finding clues. If we don't, then we will investigate every missing child." Sora added, "We should start investigating the children who went missing more recently. After all, due to having so much success, they would get overconfident and leave some clues behind." Akihiko nodded. Fujin also agreed with the analysis. He wondered, exactly who would kidnap young children in this world? If they had Keki Genkai, then Kumo would have been the suspect. But these are just normal kids. Is someone planning on creating a root-like organization and hence kidnap these kids? Fujin analyzed the possibility and concluded, yeah, that could be the case. Kuza's military isn't strong. They got hit by both Konoha and Iwa in the Second and Third Great Ninja Wars. So creating a secret force here would be convenient, and they could keep kidnapping more children in the future to increase their numbers. But which force would that be? I don't recall any major player from Kuza in Naruto, unless they were discovered and destroyed, or they never got enough strength to be relevant. Another point to consider is, should I use such a tactic while trying to build my force in the future? Fujin analyzed the feasibility of his idea. After some time, he decided, taking in young kids and training them would require at least half a decade for them to be worth anything. It will be too much effort for little reward and very difficult to do without proper organization. More importantly, this act is completely morally bankrupt. While I am not morally upright and don't mind doing some evil stuff, kidnapping young kids and making life miserable for them is too much for me. Especially without any huge benefits. Not to mention, if I were to get caught in this act, I would certainly be hunted and killed, so not worth doing it, especially considering the vast number of kids whose lives are already hell in this world. I would be better off just recruiting them. After all, those kids would genuinely admire and respect me and would be willing to work their hardest to get out of that terrible life. As Fujin was deep in thought, Miko looked at him and asked softly, "Hey, what are you thinking?" Fujin looked at her and answered, "I was thinking about which scums would kidnap little kids and separate them from their parents. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to any conclusion." Miko sighed. "Yeah, there are terrible people everywhere. If we find them, I will be torturing the shit out of them." Fujin chuckled at her anger. He said, "Now that I think about it, it's been quite a few months since I went on a killing spree." Miko looked at him with a deadpan expression and said, "You kill very quickly and efficiently. They feel no pain at all and die in an instant." Leave them to me, I have a new genjutsu that I want to test. A sadistic grin appeared on her face. Fujin said, I think you would be a perfect fit in the TI department of Konoha. Miko looked at him and said, the Uchiha police force has our own TI department. Though we don't use it much, as we mostly police the common citizens. Fujin said, oh, I didn't know that. Akihiko announced, stay on alert, we are reaching that location. Everyone raised their alertness to the max. Akihiko stopped, others stopped behind him. The area was covered with huge grass that was up to 5 feet tall, however, it was the same as everything around it. The only distinguishing factor was a few spears planted around the area to mark it. Akihiko said, Kusugakunins planted this area with spears to mark where the rescue teams went missing. Miko said, the grass is very tall in this country, it will be difficult to investigate properly. Akihiko smirked and said, yes, and hence it will also be difficult to cover up any traces left. Everyone except Fujin. Use your Sharingans to find clues. All Uchihas activated their Sharingans and began investigating. Though no one said anything, it left Fujin standing alone awkwardly. He saw Shunko looking at him with a smirk aiming at belittling him. Miko too looked back at Fujin and grinned to tease him. Fujin looked back with amusement, thinking, why are you so excited about doing manual labor? He took out a scroll. Both Miko and Shunko watched with curiosity. He opened it and summoned an instant noodle cup, a thermos bottle containing hot water and a couple of chopsticks. He opened the instant noodle cup, poured water and stirred it slightly, and waited for a couple of minutes. Now Miko and Shunko had dark faces. Both complained in their minds, why does he get to eat while we have to work? Heck, I haven't eaten anything since the morning. They tried ignoring Fujin, but the smell of noodles began spreading. Fujin thought, I'm glad that I bought so many instant noodles from the land of noodles. He began eating. While eating, he kept his eyes on the Uchihas who were working hard in the grasslands. Shunko immediately complained out loud, hey you, why are you eating while we are working? Fujin looked at him and slurped the noodles. He pointed at his eye and calmly said, I don't have the Sharingan eye, you do. Good luck with searching. Shunko was irritated at that response. He yelled, why you? However, Akihiko interrupted him. Shunko, get back to work. A scowl formed on his face, but he didn't dare to disobey Akihiko. He looked at Fujin grudgingly and got back to work. Fujin wondered, Miko was very arrogant too when I met her. If not for Rinjuro and perhaps me, she would have remained that arrogant. I wonder if Itachi was just fed up with all the arrogant pricks around him and decided to pull the plug. The group kept searching for a few minutes when Sora said, there are some footmarks here. Everyone immediately appeared next to him. Fujin wondered, where are these footmarks? However, Akihiko said, good work. They began following the footmarks. Fujin followed. Thinking, the investigative powers of Sharingan are impressive. Even after focusing chakra in my eyes, I can't see anything at all. They walked for around 40 meters before stopping. All Uchihas frowned. Masaru said, the footsteps have ended here. Shunko asked, but how could they stop here? Akihiko said, they walked from there until here. From here they traveled through other means. They either went through under the ground, flew above it or teleported. Sora made a hand sign and disappeared underground. Miko asked, how will we track them if they flew or teleported? Akihiko said, we can't. We will have to find a new clue. Sora appeared from the ground and said, there are no traces underground. Akihiko said, looks like they are using reverse summoning. No wonder there were no clues to be found. Fujin asked, how will we find them if they reverse summon themselves? If we assume that they kidnapped the children by reverse summoning too, then there won't be any clues at all. Miko and Shunko too had the same query. Akihiko answered, yes, there won't be any clues while they escape. However, there will be clues of them entering the village and reaching the kids, Fujin thought and replied, that makes sense, except that there are probably hundreds of people who enter and leave the villages on a daily basis, unless they entered the village through illegal routes. It would be very difficult to trace them. Masaru smirked and said, don't underestimate our eyes, kiddo. Just stay back and observe the magic. Akihiko said, enough talking. This place is a dead end. Let's go to the villages and check. The group began moving quickly towards the nearest village. Chapter 171 The Impossible Trail. While moving, Akihiko observed the map. He said, this village is Tsumogoi. It was the 5th village to have its children kidnapped. We will separate into 3 groups. Sora and Masaru will lead each group. Miko, Fujin, you two will come with me. Shenji and Shunko will be with Masaru. Haru, you will work with Sora. Everyone nodded. Akihiko continued, we will visit the homes of the missing kids one by one and see from where they went missing. We will investigate that location and check any trails from that location until we find the right one. The group moved at full speed and reached the village in less than an hour. They met up with the village chief and divided into the 3 groups. Each group had an official from the village leading them. Miko and Fujin followed Akihiko. They reached a small home. The official knocked on the door. In a few seconds, a middle-aged woman opened the door. Fujin could observe that her health didn't seem very good. Inside the house, he could see a middle-aged man and 2 old people. She said in a weak voice, "Kaito-sama, is there any news about my daughter?" Kaito was the official who had joined the group. He said, "We are working all the time. We will find them soon. These Konoha ninjas have arrived here to look for them. Please cooperate with them." The woman looked at Akihiko. Akihiko asked, "Can you tell me where you last saw your daughter?" The lady said she had gone out to play with her friends. They all went missing. She began sobbing. Akihiko asked, "Can you lead me to the playground?" The woman nodded. Her husband came out and said, "I'll also come with you." Akihiko nodded. The group headed to the playground. On reaching, they saw that the playground had been sealed and barricaded. Kaito said, "We restricted entry to the playground after the kids went missing." Akihiko asked, "Did all children who were playing in this playground go missing?" Kaito answered, "No, only 6 children went missing from this playground. More children were playing here, but they didn't notice anything. In total, 23 children went missing from the village. In addition to these 6, 11 more were playing in other playgrounds before going missing." Akihiko nodded and said, "Miko, check the playground for footsteps with me." Fujin, use your sensor skills to see if you can find anything odd. Miko nodded and entered the playground alongside Akihiko. Meanwhile, Fujin wondered, did he just give me a useless task just to make me feel included? He spread his chakra field and observed by focusing the chakra in his eyes but couldn't find anything. Since it was pointless, he stopped wasting his chakra and just waited for Akihiko and Miko to find something. Akihiko and Miko had their Sharingans active the entire time. They looked at the entire playground to observe the footprints. Most of the footprints had already been messed up due to the winds and the investigation carried out by Kusagaku ninjas. However, their Sharingans could still notice the footprints. After searching for around 10 minutes, both Akihiko and Miko arrived at the same end of the playground. Akihiko looked back and called everyone. Fujin, Kaito and the kids' parents walked towards him. Akihiko looked at the parents and said, "You guys can go home. I will try my best to find your daughter and bring her back safely." The woman broke down again, while her husband thanked him and left with her. Akihiko said, "There are many footprints leaving the playground. Most of them are at normal exits. However, this area isn't some place where anyone would leave the playground normally. There are footprints of 6 small kids and 2 adults here, and someone has tried to hide them with wind jutsu." As he said, he looked at Kaito. Kaito immediately said, "I'm sure that no one from our village would do it. It is probably the kidnappers." Akihiko nodded and made a shadow clone. He said, "Fujin, stay here with my clone." Fujin nodded. Akihiko, Miko and Kaito followed the footprints. Akihiko's clone said, "We will ensure that no one disturbs the playground. If anyone comes here unintentionally, make them turn back. If anyone tries to create trouble, then you have permission to kill, though if you can avoid killing, then just knock him unconscious for us to interrogate." Fujin nodded. Akihiko and Miko kept following the footmarks. They walked for around 200 meters before stopping. The place where they stopped was completely isolated. There were no homes in this area. It was completely covered by trees and had no roads in it. Hence, the villagers would never walk through here. Miko said, "The footprints end here. Instead, more footprints are coming from other directions." Akihiko nodded and said, "Yes, 21 of those footprints are of young kids, 8 of adults." Miko frowned and said, "Assuming that they brought all the kidnapped kids here, why are 2 footprints missing?" Akihiko replied, "Perhaps the kidnappers were carrying them. After all, some of the kidnapped kids are just over 2 years old." Kaito interrupted them and asked, "Were all the kidnapped kids brought here?" Akihiko nodded and said, "Most likely." He asked in excitement and hope, "So can you track them from here?" Unfortunately, his hopes would be dashed. Akihiko said, "It isn't that easy. Though there are many footmarks coming to this place, there are very few that go away. None of the kids walked away from here, so it will be difficult to trace them." Kaito frowned but didn't say anything. Miko asked, "What now, uncle?" Akihiko said, "Let's wait for Sora and Masaru to arrive here. We will try to backtrack the footprints to see how they arrived here." We can be more sure of the result if all three teams reach the same conclusion. Miko nodded. They waited. After around 15 minutes, Sora's team arrived. Masari's team arrived a few minutes later. All three teams had reached the same conclusion. Okihiko said, "Let's trace these 8 footprints and see where they come from. It will be easy if some of them are from this village. Else we will be out on a long trail." Sora and Masari nodded. All three teams began tracing the footprints. Okihiko and Miko soon returned to the playground where Fujin was. Okihiko's clone dispelled itself. Okihiko and Miko followed the trail of the footprints in the playground. Fujin followed behind. Soon they left the playground. They walked through the streets. At some point, the footprints split in 2 directions. Okihiko made a clone to trail the other footprint. But soon they met again. After trailing everything, they reached the village gate. Miko sighed. "We will have to search in the wild." Okihiko nodded. "And we can't even rest. Otherwise we might lose the trail." Fujin thought. "Wow, I never thought that I would be the slacker in the team." Fat said, "It doesn't feel bad to just relax and even eat while others do all the hard work, haha, and they can't even complain." Asaru and Sora's teams also reached the gate. They too sighed at the amount of work they would have to do. Okihiko looked at the officials and said, "We found a trail, so we will investigate it. See to it that no one in the village damages the trails that we saw." They nodded. The Konoha ninjas left the village. All of them ate a soldier pill. The Uchiha ate it as using the Sharingan continuously was eating up their chakra, while Fujin ate it as they won't be waiting for any breaks. As they were moving, Shunko complained, "It is very difficult keeping a track of the trail in this grassland." Masari replied, "Yes, and finding a new trail is even more difficult. We couldn't find any proper trail to backtrack in the previous location. That is why, once you find a proper trail, don't let it go to waste." Shunko nodded helplessly. The task was already difficult due to the grassland. It was made even more difficult by the use of wind and earth elements to hide the footprints, and all other clues were eliminated by the kidnappers. There was no scent to use, just microscopic footprints that were difficult even for the Sharingan to see. The group trailed the footprints for over 14 hours. Finally, they reached the end. The footprints went towards a mountain. There was a small village being built on one side of the mountain. It looked to be built very recently. Additionally, the mountain had a huge cave. The mouth of the cave was 10 meters wide and 15 meters high. The Sharingan observed the chakra signatures inside the cave. Fujin too saw them. Masaru said, "That's one big cave." Shunko wondered, "Who are these people, and are the kidnapped children here?" Okihiko answered, "Most likely. I'm guessing that they are imprisoned somewhere inside the cave. Don't engage in combat and stay hidden until we find the kids." As they were speaking, a group of people exited the cave. The Konoha ninjas stopped talking and observed. They were already hidden properly, and hence weren't worried that they would be noticed. However, Fujin's eyes widened as he saw those people. Chapter 172 Jashin. 7 people exited the cave. All had weird symbols on their faces and wore robes. One of them said, "We need to find around 175 children to complete the ritual. If we don't bring them here in time, then Zankoku-sama will skin us alive." Another said, "But how can we do that? All villages in this country are on high alert. It's impossible to kidnap more of them." The man standing in the center said, "In that case, we just need to go to the neighboring countries and kidnap 175 children before they become alert." However, the other members weren't entirely convinced. They said, "But reverse summoning over long distances will need a lot more chakra. It will be very difficult." However, the man insisted, "There is no other way. We will kidnap children from the land of Waterfall. We will focus on the villages close to the border area, so the distance won't be much larger." As they were discussing, Fujin's mind was busy analyzing as well. "Though I don't recall Haiden's tattoos well, their tattoos make me think of the marks that would appear on Haiden after he licked someone's blood. Safe to say that these guys are followers of Jashin. But what the heck are they doing here? Wasn't Haiden from the land of hot water? Also, why do they already have those marks? Aren't they useless unless they stand in that diagram made from blood? No, I don't think these guys are as strong as Haiden. Otherwise, their group would be too strong. I guess that they have just made the tattoos manually, and they don't have the same mastery of whatever this craft is as Haiden. Still, why are there so many Jashin followers? I thought Haiden was the only one, or perhaps one of very few." That said, except for the one in the center, their chakra seems quite low, so I guess they just got wiped out before Haiden completed his ritual. Perhaps in this mission itself. Another point to consider is, wasn't Konoha completely unaware of the existence of Jashin? Shouldn't this mission have made them aware of the existence of Jashin, or at least his followers and their rituals? So did they not report this mission accurately, or will Konoha be aware of them? Fujin thought for a bit and concluded, no, a religion that engages in kidnapping and sacrificing staying secret for so long in a world full of ninjas is unlikely. It's more probable that all 5 villagers are aware of them, just that either they didn't consider Jashin to be much of a threat, or Jashinists managed to hide or escape from them. There is also the matter of Orochimaru. He is exploring ways to attain immortality. So did he also experiment with Jashin? That's one research I'd like to see. After all, though Haiden was weak, there wouldn't be any ninja who wouldn't want his survivability. Though Orochimaru left the Akatsuki before Haiden joined it, he should still be aware of Jashin's. At the very least, he should become aware of them after Haiden joins the Akatsuki. Well, I will consider this later. There is no point in thinking about this for now. As he was analyzing, Fujin saw them talk. Unfortunately, the distance between them was too high, so he couldn't hear anything. However, the same wasn't the case with his teammates. Each one of them understood the entire conversation by reading their lips. Shunko and Miko frowned. Anger could be seen on their faces. Shunko asked softly, "Can we kill them?" Uncle Okihiko replied, "Not yet. The kids should be alive. Our main mission is to ensure that the kidnapped kids are safe. Don't attack anyone impulsively." Shunko nodded unwillingly. Okihiko said, "The tents have 17 people. They are probably from this group. In addition to these 7, there are 20 more patrolling around the village and the mountain. However, my Sharingans can't observe any chakra inside the mountain. It looks like they have a seal master," Sora said, "unless this group is backed by one of the 5 villages. Their mastery of Fuin Jutsu shouldn't be too high. I'll deal with the seals, but I will need some time, and my actions could be noticed by the ones outside that cave." Fujin looked at Sora and thought, is he a seal master, or do those broken eyes also neutralize Fuin Jutsu? Okihiko began analyzing a plan. Fujin said, "I could assassinate the ones under elite tuning levels silently." However, Okihiko shook his head and said, "No, there is no guarantee of assassinating silently when dealing with ninjas. Just one miscalculation will blow up our cover." He looked at Sora and said, "Sora, you take a look at the seals and begin neutralizing it. Haru and Genji would go with you. For now, move under the ground so that your cover isn't blown." They nodded and made a few hand signs and disappeared under the ground. Okihiko said, "The guy in the center of the group is at Junin level, and there is another Junin level opponent in the central tent." Fujin, "How confident are you in assassinating at a quick speed?" Fujin replied, "I can launch a dozen air bullets at the same time and accurately. Unless the enemy's reaction speed is very fast, they will die." Okihiko said, "That's good." He observed the Jashin worshippers entering the central tent. Inside the tent there was a big circular table, and there were 6 people, one of whom was the Junin level ninja that Okihiko had talked about. The others were at Chunin levels. As they entered the tent, the Junin level ninja in the tent asked, "Datsurin, is there any command from the Grand Priest?" Datsurin was the Junin from the 7 kidnappers who had left the cave. He stood on the other side of the table, nodded and said, "Yes, we have to kidnap 175 more kids between the ages of 2 and 6. Yasuhiro frowned. He understood the difficulty of the task. He looked at his followers in the tent. His followers understood that he needed some privacy to discuss something important. All but 2 left the tent. Datsurin too did the same. His followers also left the tent. So only Yasuhiro, Datsurin, and 4 Chunnings were in the tent. Yasuhiro said, "We need to discuss from which villages we should kidnap more children, and also need to consider how many people we will need to successfully reverse summon from that distance." Datsurin nodded. He was about to speak when suddenly he felt something. He quickly turned around and looked behind. A minute ago, when the majority of the Chunnings left the tent, Okihiko decisively said, "We will move through the ground and enter the tent from below. Fujin, use your air bullets on the 4 Chunnings in the tent. Leave the Junins to me and Masaru. Miko and Shunko, you 2 follow as well. If Fujin fails to kill his opponents, you 2 would step in. Don't allow them to make a lot of noise and alert others." Everyone nodded and moved through the ground. Chakra glowed in Fujin's eyes as he noticed that the Chunnings were standing on opposite sides behind the Junins. He thought, "I could target them all with air bullets, but the ones who are away from me will have more time to see and dodge, if they do dodge it. My air bullets will pierce through the walls of the tent and alert others, so I will have to aim such that my bullets pass through the roof of the tent instead. That way, no one will be alerted." He made a shadow clone. Fujin's clone got in position under the two Chunings standing behind Yasuhiro, while Fujin got in position under the Chunins behind Datsurin. Masaru stayed next to Fujin's clone, while Akihiko stayed next to Fujin. At the same time, both used air bullet jutsu. The Chunins never saw the attack coming. All four were hit successfully. The air bullets pierced through their body and went through the roof of the tent. At the same time, Masaru and Akihiko also made their moves. They left the ground and attacked Yasuhiro and Datsurin respectively. Yasuhiro and Datsurin both turned around quickly. However, they were disturbed by the sight of their followers being killed so suddenly. They saw Akihiko and Masaru and became ready to fight. However, their eyes met with the three Tomo Sharingans. Both instantly fell into genjutsu. They stopped struggling and stood still. Fujin observed that and thought, I always knew how strong the Sharingan is. But seeing two Junins fall under the genjutsu so easily with just three Tomo Sharingans is still so shocking. Meanwhile, Akihiko and Masaru looked at Fujin and thought, despite all the praises she had, Miko probably still underestimated this kid, killing 4 Chunins in an instant at the mere age of 11. Very few could claim to have such an ability at that age. Miko and Shunko left the ground. Shunko was shocked at how efficient Fujin was. Akihiko said, "Good work, Fujin." He looked at Masaru, who nodded and made a hand sign. The ground in the tent began moving. The bodies of the dead Chunings and any blood in the tent began moving inside the ground, and new soil was excavated out. Soon, all signs of them were buried under the ground. Akihiko looked around and said, "There are still some blood drops on the tent. We won't be able to use this tent." Masaru nodded. Chapter 173. The Uchiha Way. Fujin, Akihiko and Masaru had moved very quickly and silently. The 7 Chunings, who had left the tent, didn't hear anything suspicious from the tent. They did hear some noise when the 4 Chunins fell to the ground. But it didn't alert them much, as they guessed that their leaders were frustrated by the difficulty of the next mission. Inside the tent, Akihiko looked at Datsurin and asked, "Who are you?" Datsurin answered, "I am Datsurin, a follower of Lord Jashin." Akihiko asked, "Who is Lord Jashin?" As Datsurin answered, pride could be felt in his voice. "He is the god who we worship. He will save humanity." His reply surprised the Konoha ninjas. They all looked at him like he was an idiot. Miko asked, "Is he being serious?" Shunko exclaimed, "Did he kidnap hundreds of children for a fake god?" Akihiko sighed and said, "There are lunatics like him all over the world." He asked, "Tell me how many people you have with you and their power levels." Datsurin said, "We are led by Sankoku. He is the Grand Priest and is organizing a ritual for Lord Jashin. He has 7 priests under him, including me. Each priest has 3 to 7 devotees under them, and every devotee has 3 to 7 servants serving them. A priest is as powerful as a Junin, a devotee is as powerful as a Chunin, whereas servants can go up against Genins. In total, we have 37 devotees and 140 servants." The number alarmed the Konoha ninjas. Masaru muttered, 7 Junins, 36 Chunings, and 140 Genins. They are as strong as a normal ninja clan. The others nodded. This mission could no longer be classified as a rank A mission. Fujin thought, 2 consecutive missions getting upgraded to the next rank. I wonder if this one would result in casualties as well. I need to be on guard. Akihiko asked, "How strong is the Grand Priest?" Datsurin said, "I am not aware of his strength." Akihiko frowned. Fujin said, "If we assume that he is as strong as an elite Junin, then this mission would be very difficult." For once, Miko and Shunto didn't disagree with Fujin. Akihiko sighed and said, "If I knew that this mission would be so difficult, I wouldn't have brought you kids along. Sadly, we have no choice but to act. Stay on guard." He looked at Fujin, Miko and Shunko and said, "You are still very young, so you aren't aware of how the Uchiha clan operates in the missions. See how the events play out carefully, especially Miko and Shunko. In the future, you will have to lead Uchiha squads into missions." Both nodded obediently. Fujin too heard carefully and thought, "I am intrigued. I hope he puts up a good show." Akihiko asked Datsurin, "Are the children you kidnapped still alive?" He answered, "Yes." Akihiko asked, "Where are they?" Datsurin answered, "They have been imprisoned in the cave." Akihiko asked, "Why did you kidnap them?" Datsurin answered, "Sankoku-sama is conducting a ritual. For this ritual to be successful, we have to offer young kids to Lord Jashin. If he is successful, he will receive the blessing of Lord Jashin." His answer angered Miko and Shunko. Masaru and Akihiko looked composed. Fujin analyzed. "Blessings of Jashin? Is this ritual the one that granted Haiden his immortality? Did he also have to kill hundreds of young kids, or did he use a different method?" Okihiko continued asking, when will the children be sacrificed? Datsurin answered, Sankoku-sama still needs another 175 children as sacrifices for his ritual to be successful. All sacrifices will have to be done at the same time. Hearing that, the Konoha ninjas sighed in relief. Fujin said, that means that they won't hurt the children. Instead, they would do everything they can to keep them safe. Okihiko nodded, yes, we have time. The only worry will be if the Senkoku realized our threat and decides to kill the children before escaping. That possibility put some pressure on them again. However, with the knowledge that the children will be safe, they knew that they can proceed with the mission without taking undue pressure or risks. Okihiko looked at Datsurin and commanded, leave the tent. Make your remaining 4 followers follow you into an empty tent and make them sit next to each other with their eyes closed. Datsurin followed his instructions and left. Okihiko looked at Fujin and said, Fujin, follow me. He disappeared underground and followed Datsurin. Fujin followed him. Datsurin left the cave and looked at his followers and said, follow me. The 4 devotees that had arrived out of the cave with him followed him. One of them asked, where are we going? And what happened to Unk? However, Datsurin harshly said, just follow me. His tone surprised the devotees. They thought, normally he is very cordial with us. Did he get into an argument with Yasuhiro-sama for his mood to become so bad? Not wanting to upset him, they followed him silently. Datsurin soon entered an empty tent. His 4 devotees followed. Datsurin looked at them and said, sit down in a meditative position. Close your eyes and listen to what I have to say. They nodded and followed his instructions. As soon as they sat and closed their eyes, Fujin launched air bullets at everyone's hearts and brains. Not expecting any such attack, all 4 were hit. They all died without making a sound. Fujin and Okihiko appeared from under the ground. Okihiko made a hand sign that buried all the dead bodies. Fujin looked at Okihiko. His thoughts became heavy as he thought. His tactic, don't tell Unki elsewhere. Masaru looked at Yasuhiro and instructed him the same. He followed Yasuhiro along with Miko and Shunko through the ground. They used the same tactic. However, since Fujin wasn't with them, they had to cut their heads off from behind. They were able to do it successfully. Okihiko looked at Fujin and said, transform into one of the devotees. Fujin nodded and transformed. Okihiko checked his transformation and transformed into another devotee. He looked at Datsurin and said, lead us into the tents of others. Datsurin obeyed and left the tent as Fujin and Okihiko followed him. Masaru too used the same tactic. In no time all the remaining 11 people in various tents were dead. The 2 teams met. Masaru said, now we just have to deal with those 20 who are patrolling. Okihiko nodded and asked Datsurin, can you call them back a few at a time? Datsurin replied, no, Yasuhiro is responsible for patrol teams. Masaru asked Yasuhiro. He said, our patrol teams move in pairs. I can call them all back one by one. Masaru said, do it. Yasuhiro immediately began recalling the patrol teams one by one. The patrol teams were made exclusively of servants. They were all very weak. The Konoha ninjas killed them all without giving them any chance to alert anyone. With all but the 2 priests dead, they moved towards Sora, who was analyzing the seals. Sora noticed them coming. Despite the disguise, he could recognize their chakra easily. He left the underground. Haru and Genji also followed him. Sora said, the cave has 120 seals inscribed in it. I will need some time to disarm them one by one without alerting their seal master. Okihiko said, we have these 2 under our control and they are ranked very high, so it may be better to just disguise as their followers and go in. However, Sora shook his head and said, no, one of the seals is an identification seal. The tattoos on their body act as an identity card for the seal. We won't be able to replicate it with the transformation jutsu. Also, some of the seals are inscribed in a combination, so entering without disarming them could be lethal. Okihiko frowned. He asked Datsurin, how frequently do you guys travel in and out of the cave? He answered, everyone inside the cave is very busy with the ritual, so they don't come out frequently. I and Yasuhiro were responsible for deciding our targets and making the necessary preparations. Tomorrow, 2 more priests, their devotees and their servants would leave the cave. One of them is responsible for combat, while the other specializes in reverse summoning. We would have left tomorrow for the next round of kidnapping. Okihiko looked at Sora. Sora said, that should be enough time. It's already evening, so we can assume that we would have around 10 hours at the very least. It should be more than enough for me to get rid of the seals. Okihiko nodded and said, all right, we are already in enemy territory, so we can't rest. In case they decide to come out in large numbers for some reason, we will be in a tough spot if half of us are sleeping. So eat your food pills. We will stay up until the children are secured. Everyone nodded and ate their food pills. Fujin asked Sora, "Can I observe you while you deal with the seals?" Sora was surprised by the request. He asked, "Are you interested in Fuin Jutsu?" Fujin nodded. Sora said, "All right, you can follow me." Akihiko said, "In that case, we will leave the task of protecting Sora from any sneak attacks to you, Fujin. The rest of us will keep an eye on the cave entrance." Chapter 174 The Battlefield. Everyone nodded. Except for Fujin and Sora, the others took positions that would allow them to keep an eye on the cave entrance and help them in ambushing the enemy. Akihiko and Masaru also interrogated Yasuhiro and Dasaran about the interior of the cave. They drew up a rough map and also marked where the children were imprisoned. They also learnt that the seal master was a priest as well, and he would never leave the cave. Meanwhile, Sora began releasing the seals that he had observed and put fake seals in their place instead so that the seal master inside the cave wouldn't be alerted. Fujin followed him and observed his work properly. He was surprised. Fujin thought, "Wow, his mastery of the seals is way beyond mine. No wonder he was so confident. I wonder if he is a grand master in Fuin Jutsu." Fujin observed him very carefully, though Sora used some seals that Fujin didn't know. Most of the seals he used were the ones that Fujin knew or had read in the library. Though the seals were similar, Sora used many different methods to use the seals. What intrigued Fujin the most is how he placed fake seals and the speed at which he made them. The fake seal was placed almost instantly. Fujin's knowledge about seals grew every minute. Sora noticed Fujin observing him. He thought, "Looks like he is intrigued by the seals. Unfortunately, Fuin Jutsu is very boring. He will be bored in some time." However, to his surprise, Fujin didn't lose his concentration for hours. In the end, he couldn't resist but ask Fujin, "Are you interested in becoming a seal master?" Fujin nodded and said, "Yes, I have studied some seals from the library, though I am still a long way from becoming a seal master." If it was earlier, Fujin would have never exposed his skill with the seals. However, after inscribing his home in 10 times more seals than what the Jashinists inscribed on their base, it was only a matter of time before his skills became known. So he didn't bother hiding it actively anymore. Sora was surprised. He thought, "Now it makes sense why he has been observing my actions with so much concentration." He said, "That's good. If you have any questions, you may ask me." Fujin immediately thanked him. "Thank you, Uncle Sora." Fujin was aware that an opportunity to ask queries to someone as skilled as Sora in Fuin Jutsu would be very rare. Fujin asked him for every doubt that he had. Surprisingly, Sora answered every question patiently while doing his job. This continued until 4:30 am when Sora was finally done. The group soon gathered together. Sora said, "The seals won't alert them of our presence any longer. We can enter the cave. I also added some seals that would help us deal with any more seals they might have inscribed inside the cave, so I would be able to neutralize them in much less time." Akihiko nodded and said, "Good work, but let's wait here for now. The two groups who would leave the cave will become suspicious if they don't find anyone here, so we will kill them first, set up a battlefield here. I want them trapped outside the cave and also ensure that they won't be able to send any messages outside. One of them specializes in reverse summoning, so shut that down as well." Sora smirked and said, "All right." He immediately got to work. He began inscribing seals in front of the cave entrance. Once they were done, he inscribed seals all around the place. There were seals to block sounds, chakra, light, etc. Seals to create an illusion for anyone who'd watch from outside to prevent any suspicion, and seals that prevented summoning and reverse summoning. In addition, he also created barriers to surround the entire place. It included a barrier on the ground to prevent any earth element users from escaping underground. He also sealed the escape to the sky by creating another barrier to prevent anyone from sending messenger birds or messages through any such means. In half an hour, Sora had inscribed seals in the area between the cave and the tents. Fujin watched thinking, "Fuck, this is like those battlefield killer moves I read in novels. Stepping into this area and engaging in a battle with him would almost be a death sentence. Unless the enemy is significantly stronger than him, there is no way to get out. Worst case, he can still trap them here temporarily." Fujin immediately made a decision. "I want it, but not this one. It is too slow. Once I reach the Grandmaster level, I'll create a battlefield that I can deploy in seconds. It will be my hunting ground." With his work done, Sora approached Akihiko and said, "It's done." Masaru smiled and said, "Let's kill those bastards." Other than Akihiko, Masaru and Fujin, the other four weren't aware of what was happening. Miko asked, "What exactly did you do, Uncle Sora?" Sora said, "I have inscribed seals in order to create the perfect ambush spot. Once they leave the cave, they will be trapped. We will be able to kill them all." The four were impressed. Akihiko said, "But we will kill them as soon as we can. No wasting time. I am having a bad feeling about this god of theirs. Sora, tell everyone their spots. And keep Fujin and Miko together. They will begin the ambush." Sora nodded. He assigned positions to stand for everyone. Once everyone was in place, he said, "As long as you are standing at the assigned spots, the enemy won't be able to see, hear or sense you. Of course, when you attack, they can guess from where the attack is coming." He looked at Miko and Fujin and said, "I will put up a barrier against the cave entrance once everyone leaves. Once you see the barrier, you can attack." They both nodded and stayed in their position. Their position was directly next to the entrance. Once the barrier was up, they would launch their jutsu. Everyone else was standing in such spots that they wouldn't get in the line of fire. They waited patiently for the Jashinists to leave the cave. They waited for half an hour. Then an hour, then 2 hours. However, no one left the cave. Miko was very annoyed. She complained, "When will those lazy asses come out of the cave?" Fujin sighed and said, "They aren't gonna come faster if you keep yelling." Miko's shoulder dropped. She muttered, "Maybe they would if I left this stupid battlefield." Fujin looked at her and wondered what Sora would think if he heard what Miko said. Thanks to the seals in their spot, other than them, the others didn't hear what they were speaking, so he alone had to hear her complaints. Finally, at around 7:30 am, some people began appearing from the cave. All Konoha ninjas readied themselves for a battle. They watched carefully as the Jashinists were leaving the cave. In all, 35 people left the cave. 2 of them were priests, 9 were devotees, and 24 were servants. As they left the cave, they entered Sora's battlefield. However, not a single person felt anything strange. Some left in silence, some were chatting casually, and a few were excited about kidnapping more children and separating them from their parents. They talked as if it would be the greatest offering to their god. Sora and Akihiko paid close attention to the entrance of the cave. Their Sharingans observed as deep into the entrance as they could. As soon as the last person entered the battlefield, Akihiko nodded. Sora made a hand sign, and a barrier sealed them, cutting all access to the outside world. Fujin and Miko saw it. Both immediately built up a huge chakra. Wind release infinite breakthrough jutsu, fire release majestic destroyer flame. Miko converted a quarter of her chakra into fire and expelled it from her mouth. The Jashinists weren't expecting any attack. Suddenly feeling the heat on their back shocked them. They turned around to see a sea of flames heading at them. However, the very next moment, a massive wind hit the sea of flames. It made the fire burn even more fiercely and made it spread out. In addition, the winds themselves were extremely sharp. The wide range of the jutsu meant that none of them would be able to dodge it. The Jashinists who were closer to the cave had no chance of resisting. They were burned alive. Luckily for the 2 priests, they were among the first ones to leave the cave. They immediately made hand signs to use defensive moves. One of them used the water prison jutsu to protect himself, while the other slammed his hands on the ground to use earth wall jutsu. Some of the devotees also tried using jutsus. 3 tried escaping underground. 4 decided to hide behind their priests, while 2 panicked and couldn't do anything. Unfortunately, the attempt to pour chakra into the ground to raise an earth wall by the priest was blocked by the barrier. The 3 devotees who tried to escape underground were also blocked. They were shocked. They looked ahead to see dozens of servants being engulfed by the fire. The priest looked at his fellow priest and immediately jumped into his water prison. The other priest allowed him in. The fire finally engulfed them. The priest sighed in relief when the fire didn't penetrate the water prison. However, all of a sudden a huge cut appeared on the water prison. It entered half a foot into the prison. The priests who had just put their guard down immediately began pouring their chakra into the water prison. Chapter 175. That's just pathetic. The fire died after around a minute. The priest finally stopped the water prison jutsu. They looked around them and were stunned. It looked like a picture from hell. All their servants were dead. The stench of their dead bodies burning lingered in the air. 6 of their devotees were dead as well. The remaining 3 had terrifying burns on their bodies. Fujin looked at their expressions. He could see the fear on their faces. He sighed and thought, in a world like this, I can understand people being cruel. After all, there are so many wars, so many evil schemes and thousands of people with superpowers. There will be people who have horrible pasts. There will be people who are ambitious. However, if you are cruel to ones weaker than you, then you should be prepared for the same happening to you when you meet someone stronger. These guys are cruel to those civilians and children but are terrified while facing us. Now that's just pathetic. The Jashinists were usually the ones who looked at others in contempt. However, if they could hear the contempt Fujin had for them, they might die just of shame. The remaining Jashinists noticed Fujin and Miko, who had left their spots earlier. One of the devotees yelled, "Who are Unk?" However, even before they completed their question, a kunai pierced through the hearts of each of the remaining devotees. At the same time, Akihiko and Masaru flickered in front of the two priests and cast a genjutsu on them. Despite being on alert due to the crazy ambush, they weren't on guard against the Sharingan. Both immediately fell under their genjutsu. The ambush battle was won in less than a couple of minutes. Except for Akihiko, Sora and Masaru, the others were surprised at how quickly the fight was over. Miko exclaimed, "They were defeated so quickly." Fujin thought, "I was right. The utility of this battlefield is crazy. I have to make one too." Masaru smirked and said, "That's the magic of Sora's battlefield. The enemies always get caught off guard, and against the fire-wind combo. Only water or earth jutsus could protect them, but the barrier blocks most of the earth jutsus, so it leaves just one element to defend within a fraction of a second." Akihiko looked at Fujin and Miko and said, "Your combination jutsu is very good." It pretty much finished the fight. After praising them, Akihiko and Masaru began interrogating the priests. Fujin looked at Miko and asked, "Which jutsu did you use? It was much stronger than your fireball or fire dragon jutsu." Miko smirked and answered, "This is one of the strongest jutsus of my clan. It is called Majestic Destroyer Flame Jutsu." Fujin was surprised. He thought, "No wonder that felt slightly similar. It's the one Madara used against the ninja army. I thought it'd be rank A or S jutsu." Then again, the scale of her jutsu is probably not even a tenth of what Madara did in the war even with my aid, and yet she looks so exhausted. Miko looked at Fujin, who was in his thoughts, and said, "What are you thinking?" Fujin replied, "Nothing. Your jutsu is very strong. And it combines perfectly with my infinite breakthrough jutsu. It is much better than when we used the great breakthrough alongside fireball or our elemental dragon jutsus." Miko nodded and said, "Yes, it spreads like a sea. That's why the combination got stronger." Fujin looked at her and said, "Yeah, but it also drains a lot of your chakra." Miko said, "Yeah, I lost a quarter of my chakra, though it'll be fine, as the soldier pill should regenerate my chakra soon." Fujin nodded. His chakra was already recovering. Akihiko and Masaru interrogated the priests similar to how they interrogated the other two. The information they received was the same. Masaru said, "We won't get any new information from them." Akihiko nodded. "Yeah." He grabbed a tanto and swiped it horizontally. The head of the priest he was interrogating flew in the air. Fujin observed carefully, thinking, "I wonder if he'd get up like Haidon." Masaru asked, "Why did you kill him? Won't it be convenient to use them?" Akihiko shook his head and said, "They are supposed to leave today. If we use them to infiltrate the cave, it will raise suspicions, and since it will cause suspicion, it's better to just use the transformation jutsu. Besides, controlling Junins costs a lot of chakra." Masaru said, "All right." He killed the other priest. Datsurin and Yasuhiro were also beheaded. Fujin was surprised. He wondered, "I was sure that they would use them to infiltrate. Was my analysis wrong? Anyways, at the very least, none of them has Haydn's immortality. I wonder if the Grand Priest would be any different." Akihiko laid a map on the ground and said, "Take a close look at this." Everyone gathered around the map. This was the map of the interior of the cave that he made after interrogating Datsurin and Yasuhiro. Shunko commented, "This cave is huge." Akihiko nodded. He said, "The cave has 3 layers and has a lot of room on each layer. The lowest layer is the one where the Grand Priest is making the arrangements for the ritual. All the remaining 3 priests, including the Seal Master, are helping him. The children are kept at that level too." Fujin asked, "Will we directly infiltrate into the lowest layer, or will we kill off the devotees and servants on the layers above?" Akihiko answered, "Though their numbers sounded high, their fighting power is quite weak. The priests aren't as strong as us Junins, while the devotees and servants are very weak compared to any of us. A good fire-wind combination jutsu can wipe them all out, so I am not worried about their interference. We will focus on moving to the lowest level after making some preparations. The major issue is that all the children aren't kept together. As you can see at the lowest layer, there is 1 central room and 5 rooms surrounding it, forming a perfect pentagon around the center room. The children have been divided into these 5 rooms equally. Sora, you and Haru will be responsible for keeping the kids safe when we reach the lowest level. You two will have to make shadow clones so that you can cover all 5 rooms. Others will help me in defeating the enemy." Everyone nodded. Akihiko made a hand sign and disappeared underground. Others followed him. They entered the mountain. The group skipped the first layer and entered the second layer without any obstacles. However, the lowest layer was protected by some more seals. Sora said, "I will need around 10 minutes to resolve them." Akihiko replied, "Take your time, just don't alert them. Haru, stay with him. Others come with me." The group split into two once again. After moving some distance, Akihiko stopped and looked straight ahead at a cavern. He said, "According to the intel, the devotees of the Seal Master stay in this cavern. And he is the only priest that has 7 devotees." Shunku asked, "Should we kill them?" Akihiko said, "No, they are useful to us alive." He looked at the 3 Chunnings and said, "Keep an eye on the entrance. If someone enters, let them come in and kill them silently." The 3 Chunnings nodded. Deep in the cavern, 3 men were eating breakfast. However, their meal looked to be a lot for a morning breakfast. One of them said, "The work has been so high lately. We had to stay up all night." Another sighed and replied, "Yeah, and we have to get back to work by noon. I hope Zankoku-sama's ritual gets completed soon." As they were talking, they saw a few silhouettes. They quickly looked at them and recognized them instantly. They stood up immediately and asked Datsurin-sama, "Why are you here?" In front of them, Datsurin stood along with 2 of his devotees. All 3 wondered what they were doing in this part of the base. But suddenly the eyes of Datsurin and his devotees turned red. The 3 weren't able to take their eyes off them and fell into a genjutsu. Masaru smirked. "Easy as always." Akihiko nodded. The Uchias cast more genjutsu and left. The group moved around the cave. They put 5 devotees and 12 servants under genjutsu before returning back to where Sora was. Sora said, "I can deactivate the seals now." Akihiko said, "Wait a few minutes." Sora knew what Akihiko was planning. He nodded. Soon, 3 devotees suddenly moved from the second layer into the lowest layer of the cave. Due to the seals, there were no physical guards present anywhere in the cave. After entering the lowest level, they went towards the seal master. Akihiko said, "Deactivate the seals without letting him catch on." Sora deactivated the seals and placed fake seals in place. Immediately, all 8 of them headed to the lowest level while still staying underground. Sora and Haru split off from the group and headed to where the children were kept. The others headed towards the Grand Priest. Chapter 176, A Blood Dome. In the central room at the lowest level of the cave, the Grand Priest was meditating at the center of the cave. The Grand Priest was from the same generation as Konoha's legendary Sanins. His body was extremely muscular. However, he had numerous sword scars and burn scars all over his body. Even his face had 2 huge sword scars forming an X on his face. In addition, his left cheek had a burn scar that covered it entirely. The room was quite unique as well. There was a circle dug into the ground that surrounded the entire room. It was about 3 inches deep and 6 inches wide. 5 straight lines were dug from this circle into the 5 rooms that surrounded the central room with the same depth and width. In addition, an equilateral triangle was dug such that it was inscribed in the circle. There were also 7 pillars in the room. They were all equidistant from where the Grand Priest was meditating. Most importantly, blood flowed through the circle and the triangle. In addition, the ground and the walls were covered with mysterious symbols. The devotees and the servants were working on drawing even more symbols as the priest supervised. On one of the pillars, an old man sat. He had a long white beard that extended up to his abdomen. However, in contrast to his beard, his head was as bald as a desert landscape. Like the Grand Priest, he too had a few sword scars on his body. However, unlike him, the old man's body was very fragile. He wore a clean silver robe and observed everyone around him while stroking his beard. He thought, "The preparations for the ritual are almost over. Soon, we will only be missing the children. Once Datsurin and the rest bring the children, we will add the blood of the children from the 5 rooms to this room and begin the ritual. Then we can begin the ritual." The old man, who thought about killing 375 children with no remorse or pity, was the one who had placed seals in the cave as he was observing everyone's work. He noticed 3 devotees approaching him. He looked at them and asked, "Why aren't you 3 resting?" One of the 3 devotees laughed awkwardly and said, "Isayume-sama, the ritual is so close to completion. We were excited and couldn't sleep, so we decided to help complete all the preparations before sleeping." The old man looked at them and thought, "Not bad. Unlike the other priests, all my devotees are extremely dedicated to Lord Jashin." He said, "Good. With your help, the work should be done in the next 3 hours. Aid your fellow devotees." The trio nodded and went past his pillar towards other devotees. Everyone continued working as normal. However, they were ignorant about the calamity that was about to befall them. The Konoha ninjas were hiding in the walls of the room. Fujin concentrated chakra in his eyes while others had their Sharingan activated. They were waiting for Sora and Haru. In a few minutes, Sora set up barriers to isolate the rooms that held the kids from the central room. As soon as the barrier was up, Fujin and Miko built up their chakra and exited the cave walls. Their entrance instantly attracted dozens of eyes. All the 3 priests looked at them too. The Grand Priest also opened his eyes. However, before anyone could act, their eyes could only see a firestorm. Fujin and Miko both used their respective jutsus: Fire Release Majestic Destroyer Flame, Wind Release Infinite Breakthrough Jutsu. The combination jutsu threatened to consume everyone in the circular room. The sudden attack caused a lot of panic. Many tried making a jutsu, but the short time meant that most couldn't. Only 2 people managed to act in time. Isayu made a hand seal. Immediately a barrier appeared across the room. It divided the room into 2. With Miko and Fujin on one side, and all the priests and the Grand Priest on the other side, the Grand Priest Senkoku was the other one to act. He controlled the blood in the room to rise up and act as a barrier. However, the short time meant that he couldn't infuse much chakra into the blood to make the barrier sturdy. Fujin's winds blasted through the blood barriers. The firestorm hit Isayu's barrier and was halted. However, all the Jashinists on their side of the barrier were burnt alive. Many painful screams could be heard in the fire. Their screams unnerved the Jashinists. The kidnapped children also heard the screams and began crying. All the devotees and servants who were alive gathered around their priests. Everyone took out their weapons. Only Isayu's devotees were all alive as they were working behind him. The other 2 priests lost half of their subordinates. Isayu said loudly, "It looks like the rats from the land of grass have found our hideout. Don't panic, this is our base. They will be sacrificed to Lord Jashin." However, Sankoku looked menacingly at Isayu and asked, "How did you not know that there are intruders in our hideout?" Isayu, Sankoku's menacing tone frightened him. He looked back at him and said, "Sankoku-sama, I'm not sure how they infiltrated so deep without alerting me. I had inscribed all the seals properly." He truly didn't understand how they infiltrated the hideout without triggering a single seal. After all, he had inscribed over 100 seals in the cave. Sankoku said, "Let us first deal with these insects. Then I'll take care of you." Isayu's expression was grim. He focused his eyes beyond the barrier. A firestorm was still raging in that part of the room. He thought, "How the fuck did these rats appear here? I need to finish them off personally. Otherwise I might be the unlucky person to suffer Sankoku-sama's wrath." He made a hand sign intending to activate the seals that he had placed in the room, however. At that time, 2 swords pierced through his body. This sequence of actions shocked all the Jashinists. They looked at Isayu with stunned expressions. Even Sankoku was shocked. He initially suspected that Isayu had betrayed them, but now Isayu was betrayed by his own devotees. Isayu's face was full of disbelief. He turned his head around and looked at his 2 devotees. He asked why. He died without understanding why his obedient devotees killed him. The remaining 5 devotees of Isayu were the ones who had the highest impact other than Isayu himself. They looked at their fellow devotees in rage and disbelief. One of them yelled, "Why did you kill our priest?" One of the killers shouted, "This perverted old leecher killed my mother." The other one shouted, "He killed my friends. He is as sick as that pedophile Jashin." Their words shocked everyone. They were filled with rage. Sankoku shouted, "How dare you commit blasphemy?" Okihiko saw these interactions and smirked. He thought, "It's so easy to rile them up." Their small argument caused a distraction. Sankoku was about to kill them when he heard a cracking sound. He looked to see that the barrier that Isayu had erected was getting broken. Without Isayu providing chakra to it, the barrier could no longer hold the combination jutsu back. A frown formed on his face as he made a hand sign. All the blood around him rose and formed a dome with him at the center. The dome also covered the other 2 priests and their subordinates. However, the subordinates of Isayu were left without any protection. With Isayu dead, his devotees understood that they wouldn't get any help from Sankoku. They looked at Isayu's killers in anger, while making hand signs to use a jutsu to protect themselves. However, the 2 who killed Isayu began attacking the devotees who were making hand signs. This enraged them even more. They shouted, "You killed our priest, and now you 2 want to eliminate us too." In a rage, 4 devotees attacked the 2 traitors. The 2 traitors resisted. They were about to engage in an all-out fight when 2 kunais pierced the back of 2 of those devotees. They turned around to see one of their fellow devotees killing them. They exclaimed, "You 2!" At that instant, the barrier finally broke. The firestorm hit the blood dome and the subordinates of Isayu. All of Asayum's subordinates were burned alive like the others who had already died. However, the blood dome stayed strong. Fujin and Miko's combination jutsu wasn't able to pierce through it at all. Fujin thought, "This is new, he's using the blood that was flowing in the room like a water element user would use water. I wonder if all water affinity ninjas can do this, or is this something different? Also, his chakra is very strange. I have never sensed a chakra like his. It's quite high but is unstable, and it gives a different feeling as compared to normal chakra from within the blood dome." Sankoku too observed Fujin and Miko. Chapter 177 A Bloody Battle. Sankoku observed the two kids as he thought, hidden leaf headbands. And that girl is a new Uchiha. There should be more. No wonder that old buffoon's followers betrayed him. As he was analyzing, Senkoku immediately looked at the ground below. He muttered, "As I thought." Wanting to take advantage of the combination jutsu, Okihiko and the rest decided to do another surprise attack from the underground. However, due to having meditated in this room for several days, and due to the preparations he had made for the ritual, Sankoku noticed a few ninjas infiltrating from the ground. He focused chakra on his right leg. His leg was covered in a red aura. He raised his right leg and slammed it down with all his power. He decided, "It's impossible to conduct the ritual here. They will keep coming like flies no matter how many I defeat. But I am definitely killing these fuckers who destroyed my ritual," he shouted. "Escape the cave." Sankoku kicked down at the center of the cave. Cracks began appearing. They expanded without slowing down. A shockwave was also sent into the ground towards Okihiko and company. They all were hit by the shockwave. Fujin and Miko watched as the cracks moved towards them. Both flickered and entered into the walls at the same time, and used Earth Instantaneous Body Jutsu to escape the collapsing cave. Okihiko and the rest were hit by the shockwave, but weren't much injured. They too employed means to escape the cave. As the cracks spread, they also reached the 5 rooms where the children were held. Sora and Haru and their clones watched with grim faces. Sora had only created one barrier to stop any random attacks from entering there. Fujin and Miko's combination jutsu hit all the barriers that he had created, but this barrier won't protect the kids if the entire cave was collapsing. Sora, Haru, and the kids noticed as the ground began cracking. The children immediately began crying loudly. Sora and his clones desperately made hand signs. After making hand signs, they slammed their hands on the floor. A barrier appeared along the floor, barely protecting the kids from any harm. However, at that time, the walls had begun cracking. Haru and his clones immediately placed their hands on the walls and poured earth chakra into the walls to strengthen them slightly and prevent them from collapsing. Sora and his clones used this window of time to create more barriers. They first made a barrier along the ceiling to prevent any rocks from falling on the kids. They followed by creating more barriers to protect the children from all sides and ensure that the floor and the ceiling were connected properly. Right when the last barrier was erected, the entire cave collapsed. Fortunately, due to the barriers, the children were safe. Sora and Haru were breathing heavily, but a smile could be seen on their faces. The kids were sage. However, despite being safe, the kids were still wailing loudly. After all, the experience was very scary. Sora and Haru looked at them. Haru and his clone made a hand sign. They cast genjutsu on all the children and made them fall asleep. When the kids fell asleep, he and his clones all fell to the ground. Sora looked at him and said, "You have lost a lot of your chakra," Haru replied while breathing heavily. "Yeah, I poured almost all my chakra into the walls." Sora said, "Yeah, good job. If you hadn't, I wouldn't have managed to complete the barriers in time. Anyways, take a rest. The soldier pills should begin recovering our chakra. But we won't be able to participate in the fight above. We will ensure that the kids stay safe." Haru nodded and sat in a meditative pose. Sora too joined him. While meditating, he thought, "That chakra spike just before the impact was different. I guess there is more depth to this god after all." That said, he will be no match against the Sharingan. This mission is over. Fujin and Miko were the first ones to leave the cave and appear outside. They saw as the mountain in front of them crumbled. Fujin said, "That guy is much stronger than I expected." Miko nodded. "Yeah, his chakra is almost as high as Sensei, and it doesn't seem humane." Fujin agreed. "Yeah, his chakra makes me feel sick. I wonder why that is." At that time, Okihiko and his group emerged from the underground. There were no casualties in their group. A few seconds later, the Jashinists also began appearing. Every Jashinist who was at the lowest level survived. However, in the above layers, all the servants died. Only the 7 devotees made it out alive. Their group now contained 1 grand priest, 2 priests, 8 devotees and 20 servants. Okihiko looked at the Jashionists and said, Miko, save your chakra. Fujin, give me a big one. Without a word, Fujin used another infinite breakthrough jutsu at the Jashionists. Okihiko followed by expelling a huge amount of fire into Fujin's jutsu. Though their combination wasn't as good as Fujin and Miko's, it was still very threatening. The wide range meant that it couldn't be dodged. Sankoku snorted. How many times will you use the same trick? He joined his hands together, almost as if he was praying. His chakra suddenly spiked. A few gallons of blood appeared from the ground and began floating in the air. Bloody shield jutsu, bloody death jutsu. The blood immediately took the form of a large screen to block the incoming jutsu. The Konoha ninjas thought that would be it. However, small needleheads formed on the surface of the screen. Thousands of needles made of blood were launched at the Konoha ninjas. Fujin expected the firestorm to deflect all the blood needles. However, they just pierced through the firestorm with ease without changing directions. Masaru stepped forward and slammed his hands on the ground. Earthwall jutsu, a giant earth wall appeared in front of the group. However, the blood needles pierced through them as well. The Konoha ninjas were surprised. Fujin immediately flickered out of the way. So did the rest except Shunko. He was slow to react. His eye saw the wall being penetrated, but his body was slow to react. His Sharingans watched the dense blood needles coming at him and he barely moved to dodge the attack. A bunch of blood needles scratched his body, leaving him with 10-12 cuts. Fujin wondered, what the heck is with this blood? It's almost as penetrative as my wind vacuum technique jutsus. A similar thought ran through the minds of the Uchihas as well. The jutsu was very lethal. Okihiko quickly scanned Shunko with his Sharingan. The wounds on him weren't lethal. He looked at Sankoku and had a bad feeling. A huge grin could be seen on Nankoku's face as he made the seal of confrontation with his left hand. Okihiko followed his gaze and looked at Shunko. His eyes widened as he saw the chakra gathering on the spots where the cuts had appeared. He yelled, Shunko, move away. Shunko didn't understand why he said so but still jumped backwards. Unfortunately, 12 explosions took place on his body at the same time. His loud shriek could be heard. Okihiko immediately flickered next to him but stayed at arm's length. He created a shadow clone to check on him. The Jashionists smirked at seeing their leader handling the enemies by themselves. Their morale was raised. They all got on the attack. However, even before they could get on the attack, Fujin, Masaru and Miko got on the attack. They didn't know what had happened with Shunko, so they stayed clear of all blood controlled by Sankoku. Fujin attacked them with the air bullet jutsu from a range, while Masaru and Miko used Phoenix Sage Fire jutsu. Their aim was to restrict the movement and kill off the weaker enemies. Unlike the earlier instance, this wasn't a large-scale jutsu, so Sankoku didn't waste his chakra to put up a huge defense. Without his help, the servants were sitting ducks for the Konoha ninjas. 12 servants died in this attack. The devotees and priests were safe, but their jutsus were disturbed. Okihiko and Genji looked at Shunko in this short window of time. They examined his injuries. Fortunately, his life wasn't in danger. He was still conscious. Okihiko said, it looks like when he was cut, some of the blood that guy controlled was left on Shunko's body. Only that blood exploded. That's why the injuries aren't lethal. Genji nodded. He agreed with the analysis. Okihiko said, carry him away from here. He is in no condition to fight. Genji nodded. All right, I'll take care of him. He carried Shunko and flickered away. Okihiko looked at Sankoku with a serious look on his face as he wondered, what the heck is his jutsu? I thought he controlled external blood, similar to water, but this looked more like the explosion release than a variant of water release. He noticed Fujin, Miko and Masaru keeping the enemy busy and decided, it doesn't matter, this farce has gone on too long. Time to end this battle. Chapter 178 Blood Can Heal. Fujin, Miko and Masaru were keeping the Jashionists busy. After his big jutsu, Sankoku didn't attack much. His priests and devotees were the ones who were counter-attacking. Fujin kept flickering around the place. Seeing an opportunity, he flickered right behind the enemy lines and fired another round of air bullets. However, one of the priests turned around and countered with water bullets without using any hand signs. Each of his water bullets hit Fujin's air bullets and neutralized them. In addition, another 4 water bullets were headed at Fujin. Fujin fired a vacuum bullet at the priest and flickered away. The priest smirked and fired a water bullet to intercept the vacuum bullet. Both attacks clashed. The priest's smirk died when he saw Fujin's attack piercing through his, as if it was just air. He immediately moved to his side. The vacuum bullet missed him by just a few inches. The priest could feel the suction force of the vacuum bullet as it passed him. A servant was behind him in line. The vacuum bullet pierced through his chest and left a hole in his right lung. The priest shouted, "Be careful of that boy's air bullets. They have a very high penetrative power." Fujin wasn't out of harm's way either. As soon as he flickered his new position was pelted with shurikens and kunais by the devotees. He had to flicker a few more times. On the other side, Masaru and Miko were fighting with the other priest and his devotees. Both spammed the Phoenix Sage fire jutsu, but were stopped by earth walls raised by the devotees. The priest stayed behind his devotees while making hand signs. Lightning release lightning fingers jutsu. He pointed his fingers at Miko and Masaru. Lightning bolts were fired at high speeds at them. Both dodged in a hurry. Some sparks hit Miko, causing the hair on her body to stand up. However, no harm was done. At that moment, a few blood drops gathered at the tip of Zankoku's fingers. He waved his hands as if to throw the blood. Those blood drops moved at a very high speed at Fujin and the other two. Fujin noticed it immediately. He immediately flickered and got out of the way. He formed 2 vacuum bullets in his mouth and fired them at Zankoku. Miko and Masaru dodged as well, but their positions were attacked further by the other priest. They had to keep dodging. Zankoku dodged Fujin's vacuum bullets with ease. Fujin frowned. These guys are good. I guess those 2 are his strongest priests. Winning against them won't be easy, not to mention that this grand priest is definitely at least at elite Junin level. What is Okihiko doing? Okihiko, who was observing the situation, made the confrontation hand seal right when Zankoku dodged Fujin's attack. When he moved, he had come closer to 3 devotees. All of a sudden, 2 devotees attacked the priest who was keeping Fujin at bay. They grabbed their kunais and attacked the priest's back. At the same time, the 2 devotees with the earth element attacked the priest who specialized in lightning release. The devotees slammed their hands on the ground, and the priest was attacked by multiple stone spears. As for Zankoku, the 3 devotees around him immediately rushed towards him. Fujin noticed the situation and was surprised. He thought, what the heck did these Uchiha Junins do exactly? How can they control so many Chunin-level ninjas so perfectly? First 3 in the cave, and now these 7, despite it being more than just a few minutes since they cast the genjutsu. I don't recall any ninja being controlled in this way in the original series. Except maybe the 4th Mizukage. Still, Obito had the Unka Fujin's thoughts were cut short as he was surprised by what he was witnessing. A water wall appeared behind the priest that he had engaged earlier. The kunais of his devotees were blocked. He made a hand sign and water spears appeared from the wall and impaled his devotees. The priest with the lightning element jumped out of the way. He fired 2 lightning beams that pierced through the heads of the devotees that attacked him. Blood appeared on the fingerprints of Zankoku. He smiled as he launched them at the 3 devotees surrounding him. 3 drops pierced through each of their chests. They coughed some blood. Unlike Fujin and Miko's surprise, Okihiko and Masaru weren't surprised at all. Okihiko analyzed. We already got 1 Junin by this tactic. The others will keep their guard up. Anyways, their lower-level fighting force is pretty much wiped out. It's still our advantage. The 4 devotees who attacked the priests died. However, the 3 devotees who attacked Zankoku were still alive. They all made a hand sign. A dozen explosion tags appeared on their bodies. Their eyes went red as they made them explode at the same instance. Zankoku, who was grinning at how easily he thwarted the Uchiha's tactic, was surprised. He yelled, "Fuck!" A thin layer of blood began forming on his body. The explosions went off. The bodies of the devotees were decimated. The explosion ripped through the thin blood layer and hit Zankoku's body with full force. The 2 priests, the remaining servants, and the lone devotee were shocked. They yelled, "Zankoku-sama!" Okihiko and Masaru smirked as they thought, it's over. With the leader dealt with, they only had to deal with the 2 priests. Defeating them wouldn't be much of a challenge. Fujin was surprised. He thought, the Sharingan definitely has a lot more depth to it. I didn't think I'd reach such a conclusion, despite knowing about Izanagi, Izanami, and the crazy things Mangekyu can do. Fujin looked at the 2 priests and wondered if he could sneak attack them. He sighed. Unfortunately, despite the shock, they are still at full alert. I guess catching a Junin off guard in battle won't be possible. The smoke of the explosion finally cleared away. Zankoku was still standing on his 2 feet. However, all his clothes were destroyed. His flesh had burn marks all over his body. His right eye had been destroyed by the blast. A lot of his blood had spilt on the ground around him. Fujin shot a vacuum bullet at him as he thought, he is still standing. Have to ensure that he is dead. After all, who knows what crazy abilities these Jashinists have. Surprisingly, Zankoku saw his attack and moved out of the way. Soon, the blood on the ground rose and covered him, forming a cocoon-like structure around him. The Konoha ninjas were shocked. Not wanting to see anything crazy, Fujin shot multiple air bullets at him. However, his attack was intercepted by water bullets once again. Miko and Masaru too tried attacking, but they were intercepted as well. Akihiko decided to not attack impulsively and kept his eye on Zankoku. In a few seconds, Zankoku stepped out from the blood cocoon. However, when he did, all the Konoha ninjas were shocked. Akihiko muttered, "How? Even the best medical ninja doesn't have this efficiency." Sankoku's wounds were all healed, only horrible scars were remaining on his body. The only wound that still could be seen was his eye. It wasn't healed. Fujin wondered. Was he healed by Jashin's blessings? Or is it due to his blood jutsus? After all, he hasn't completed the ritual to gain Jashin's blessings, right? If this healing is only due to blood jutsus and not due to Jashin, then it would be a very important jutsu to learn, though it leaves scars on the body. I don't mind them. After all, what use is looking good if I am not even alive? Zankoku looked viciously at the Konoha ninjas. He said, "Kill everybody." The Jashinists were excited at his order. However, suddenly, the priests and Zankoku attacked the remaining devotee and servants. All were killed off. The Konoha ninjas were caught off guard by this development. Akihiko thought, "Oh well, saves us the effort. Now we have the numerical advantage." Zankoku said, "Now no one will backstab us. You two don't look into those red eyes, else I will have to kill you too." The priests nodded and said, "Don't worry, we know how to deal with the Uchiors." Akihiko flickered behind Fujin and said, "You and Miko take care of the lightning user. Your wind manipulation should have an advantage." Fujin nodded. Both he and Akihiko flickered next to Miko and Masaru. Akihiko said, "Masaru, you take care of the water specialist. Miko, aid Fujin against the lightning specialist. Leave the main enemy to me." Both nodded. Miko stepped next to Fujin and said with a grin on her face, "Time to kill our first Junin." Fujin smirked and replied, "Your first Junin kill." Miko looked at Fujin and exclaimed, "You already killed one." Akihiko interrupted them and said sternly, "Pay attention. They are making a move." They stopped speaking and focused entirely on their enemy. Chapter 179 Fierce Clash in the Grasslands. The two priests weaved hand signs quickly. Water release waterfall jutsu, lightning release false darkness jutsu. One of the priests expelled a huge amount of water at the Konoha ninjas. It formed a huge wave and headed towards the Konoha ninjas. The other fired his lightning jutsu into the water, electrifying it. A smile formed on Fujin's face. "This isn't like that noodle thief. These guys are strong." Fujin gathered a huge amount of chakra. For the first time in a long while, he showed off his entire chakra. The sudden spike in his chakra gained the attention of the Uchihas around him. They were about to do multiple flickers when they felt Fujin's chakra spiking. Miko looked at him and wondered, "When did his chakra grow so much? It is almost as high as some of the Junins in my clan." Akihiko and Masaru were shocked as well. They both thought, "What chakra? It's almost as if he is from the Senju or Uzumaki clan." Akihiko thought, if he doesn't get involved in the coup, then his future will be very bright. While Masaru thought, "Shit, his chakra level isn't far away from my own level." Fujin rapidly converted his chakra into the wind element. Wind release infinite breakthrough jutsu, and he exhaled a huge wind. It hit the incoming electrocuted water wave. The high-speed winds halted the water wave. It pierced into the wave and neutralized the electric charges within it. However, the water wave also absorbed the winds and didn't allow them to move towards the Jashinists. Both jutsus neutralized each other. The water fell down on the ground and spread slowly in all directions. Fujin's jutsu also raised a huge dust cover over the battlefield. Seeing the opportunity, Fujin began forming a couple of vacuum bullets. He could sense their positions accurately. He was about to shoot out the vacuum bullets when his eyes widened. He and the Uchihas immediately flickered away. A fraction of a second after they flickered, dozens of blood drops passed through their previous location at a very fast speed. Fujin frowned. "Shit, that bastard used the same tactic, and was faster than me too." As Zankoku had the same idea as Fujin, he too used the chaos created by the two wide-range jutsus to sneak attack. Unfortunately, all the Konoha ninjas had very good senses, so his sneak attack didn't have any effect. After flickering, Masaru weaved hand signs and slammed his hands on the ground. Earth release ground splitting jutsu, the ground in between them began cracking. As a result, all the water due to the earlier jutsu began draining into the ground. Fujin observed it and thought, "Nice, fighting a lightning user over water would have been annoying." As soon as the water began draining, Okihiko weaved hand signs. Earth release earth flow spears jutsu. Masaru's jutsu had loosened up the ground. Okihiko took advantage of it. Hundreds of stone spears began appearing on the ground. In an instant they were launched at the Jashinists. The faces of the Jashinists became grim. They realized, first that massive wind jutsu, now back-to-back large-scale earth jutsus. These guys aren't weak. Blood immediately began gathering around Senkoku. At the same time, one of the priests weaved hand signs and extended his arms forward. Lightning release static wave jutsu. A lightning current was released from his palms in all directions, forming a net. The incoming stone spears hit it. Almost all the stone spears crumbled. The rest slowed down. The priest smirked. Earth jutsus are very weak against lightning. However, the debris was still headed towards the Jashinists, but a blood dome formed around the Jashinists. The stones and pebbles were about to hit the dome when hundreds of needle-shaped blood drops were launched in all directions from the dome. They pierced through the stone spears and debris, reducing or halting their momentum as well as attacking the Konoha ninjas. The Konoha ninjas dodged once again. Fujin, who had to stop creating vacuum bullets once again, frowned. He thought, shit, this bastard keeps attacking even while defending. It restricts my ability to use sneak attacks successfully. Biko noticed Fujin's frown and commented with a smirk, now you know how I and Hoka feel while fighting you. Fujin replied, pass mark comments later. Any idea how to deal with them? I'm afraid we will run out of chakra faster than that bloody priest. Even before Fujin completed his statement, both Akihiko and Masaru flickered towards the blood dome. While moving, they tapped a scroll-holding pocket on their jacket and retrieved a scroll each. At the same moment, both weaved the same hand signs. Fire release exploding flame formation. They opened the scroll. The scroll transformed into hundreds of explosive tags with fire release technique, which were launched at the blood dome in the blink of an eye. The explosive tags began exploding as soon as they hit the dome. The explosions released a huge amount of fire that wrecked the dome and allowed the remaining explosive tags to enter the dome. Fujin saw the damage and wondered, is this a variation of Tabarama's jutsu? I wonder what Tabarama would think if Uchitais are so good with a jutsu he created. That said, he did have a new Chiha student. The Jashinists immediately moved backwards. However, Okihiko and Masaru controlled the explosive tags and aimed at them. They aimed the explosive tags such that they would have to separate from each other. The explosions forced them even further from each other. Fujin and Miko were watching them carefully. As soon as their target was separated from the other two Jashinists, Fujin flickered in front of him. The priest was surprised to see him. He was about to attack when Fujin blew very strong winds straight at him. Facing such a wide-range jutsu at such a close range meant that the priest couldn't dodge the attack. The winds hit him head-on and sent him flying and rolling backwards for more than 100 meters. Multiple cuts appeared on the body of the priest. In addition, getting dragged along the ground caused him even more minor wounds. Despite the wounds, the priest got in a fighting stance right away. However, his opponent wasn't just Fujin. As soon as he got up, his position was showered by shurikens. The priest immediately moved, but Miko flickered in front of him. Fire release great fireball jutsu. The priest saw a giant fireball heading towards him. He frowned. These kids are relentless. I need to take the initiative back. He quickly made hand signs. Lightning release false darkness jutsu. He fired a lightning spear at the incoming fireball. The lightning spear pierced through the center of the fireball and dispersed it. However, the priest had no time to celebrate. Miko was no longer behind the fireball, and Fujin had appeared right next to him and was swinging his sword at him. The priest stepped behind and pulled out a black-colored retractable spear. It was a spear he used during rituals. As he moved it to block Fujin's sword, lightning began flowing through it. The sword and the spear clashed. The priest was expecting Fujin to be electrocuted. However, his eyes widened as he saw Fujin's sword cut through his spear. Realizing the danger, the priest leaned backwards. Displaying excellent flexibility, the priest almost leaned parallel to the ground by bending at his knees and leaning backwards completely. Fujin's sword slash went from above him. Even the winds alongside the slash didn't hit the priest due to how well the priest moved. A sword slash cut through the grass for over 100 meters without hurting anyone. As soon as the sword slash passed, the priest kicked at Fujin. Fujin, who was planning to bring his sword down, kicked his leg, not wanting to face his sword in close range. The priest used the force of Fujin's kick to fly backwards. Fujin followed his kick with a vertical slash with his sword at his opponent who was still in the air. Seeing the attack, the priest dug the half-cut spear into the ground and used it as a base to move out of the line of attack. Miko, who was watching his every movement with her Sharingans, realized the direction where he would be dodging. She launched multiple kunois with explosive tags at the place where he would land. However, the priest noticed the attack and extended his arms at them. Lightning sparks were released from his palms. They hit the explosive tags and disarmed them. They also slowed down the kunais and just sidestepped them. Fujin and Miko were about to press on the attack once again, but they halted after seeing their enemy's actions. Lightning had once again gathered in the palms of the priest without any hand signs. He slammed his hands on the ground. Lightning was discharged in a radius of 25 meters around him. Miko immediately flickered behind Fujin, who casually swung his sword and sent out a wind wave that neutralized the lightning discharge heading around him. The priest looked at his two opponents and took a deep breath. At last, he had broken their initiative. He said, "This one never expected that he would be pushed so much by little kids like you. Lord Jashin would be very pleased when this one sacrifices you to him." Fujin and Miko's eyes twitched as they thought, "This one? Who the hell speaks like that?" However, without replying, both Fujin and Miko pressed on the attack once again. The priest, who had just found some respite, was once again in a tough situation. Chapter 180 Akihiko vs Zankoku. Fujin and Miko both had spent a lot of their chakra due to the jutsus they used earlier, so they attacked the priest with Kenjutsu and Taijutsu. Due to the threat of Fujin's sword and Miko's Sharingan, the priest was having a tough time. Despite the advantages, Fujin or Miko didn't manage to land any hits on him. However, the priest couldn't help but complain in his mind, "What the fuck does Konoha teach in their academy? I spoke in such a hilarious tone, and I provoked them, but they kept attacking me without a single emotion on their face. I expected these brats to say at least something to give me some time to catch my breath and attack first." Some distance away from them, Akihiko and Masaru too had entered into fights. They successfully separated all the Jashinists. Akihiko took on Zankoku, while Masaru took on the remaining priest. As soon as he was far away from Zankoku, Masaru attacked the priest. He flickered in front of him and launched a fireball at him. However, the priest created a water wall to defend himself and counterattacked with sharp jets of water. Masaru dodged while closing in on the distance between them. The priest frowned while moving backwards as he thought, "He is strong. I can't get into a taijutsu fight with a new Chiha, and I have to avoid looking into his eyes. So annoying. I hope Zankoku-sama wins quickly and comes to aid me," as the priest decided to stall and fight defensively. The fight entered into a stalemate. The priest's water jutsus completely shut down Masaru's fire jutsus. Though Masaru resorted to earth jutsus, they didn't have much effect on the priest. Some distance from them, Akihiko and Zankoku faced each other. Like all Uchiha's, Akihiko launched a huge fireball at his enemy. He launched shurikens into his fireball to double up. Zankoku waved his arm. A blood wall appeared in the path of the fireball. The fireball hit the blood wall and exploded, though the explosion didn't reach Zankoku. It cleared the path for the shurikens. Zankoku's attention was entirely on Akihiko, so he didn't notice the shurikens until they were very close. He immediately moved out of the way, but a few shurikens left cuts on him. Without giving him any respite, Akihiko pressed on the attack. He flickered in front of him and attacked with a tanto. Zankoku grabbed a retractable spear and used it to block the tanto. While he blocked, Akihiko's Sharingans noticed the cut wounds on his body closing by themselves. He kept attacking. However, his expression grew grim. Akihiko analyzed. "His self-healing is off the charts. The only one I have heard about having such healing is the first Hokage. But how can this lunatic have such a healing ability, and what are its limits? If he can heal non-stop, then it wouldn't matter how many times we hit him. He will still keep healing." Zankoku looked at Akihiko's face and guessed his thoughts. He smirked and said, "That's right. No matter how many times you wound me, I will always heal. Your whole squad is doomed to die at my hun." He suddenly stopped speaking and stood still. Akihiko smirked. "It doesn't matter how much you can heal. Once you look in the eyes of a new Chiha, it's all over." While he was speaking, Zankoku looked into Akihiko's eyes. Akihiko didn't waste the opportunity and cast a Sharingan Genjutsu instantly. Akihiko stepped forward while thinking, "Now let me see if you can heal yourself after being beheaded." He raised his arm and swung his tanto at Zankoku's neck. However, all of a sudden, Zankoku attacked. He swung his spear with all his might. Akihiko's Sharingans noticed the movements and he immediately jumped backward. However, he couldn't dodge completely. The spear hit his right shoulder and left a deep cut up to his abdomen. He began bleeding profusely. A sadistic grin appeared on Zenkoku's face. In order to not alert Okihiko, he used no chakra in that attack. That is why Okihiko was caught off guard. Okihiko quickly moved back while inspecting his injury. He looked at Sankoku and asked, "How did you break my genjutsu?" Sankoku grinned and said, "I have been blessed by Lord Jashin." "Do you think your pathetic eyes will be able to cast a genjutsu on someone blessed by Lord Jashin?" While he was speaking, Okihiko analyzed, "While the cut is deep, he only managed to cut my flesh and none of my organs is hit. However, it hurts to move my right arm. I won't be able to fight with my right arm with my full strength or speed. What a shit situation to be." Okihiko narrowed his eyes and replied, "The ones who worship Jashin can't be put under a genjutsu. Bullshit. I slaughtered all your forces with my genjutsu." Senkoku didn't reply and began attacking. He noticed that his words didn't have any demoralizing effect on Okihiko. Instead, Okihiko was just taking the opportunity to rest and stall for time. Okihiko fought back while cursing in his mind, "So he heals his wounds and is immune to genjutsu. How the fuck should I fight him?" The two engaged in an intense taijutsu and kenjutsu battle. Sankoku held the advantage, but Okihiko managed to hang on and didn't take any more damage. Seeing him not making any headways, Sankoku controlled his blood and attacked Okihiko with a blood needle rain once again. Okihiko quickly flickered away while making hand signs. Fire release fire dragon jutsu. A huge 50-meter-long fire dragon was formed. It headed straight at Sankoku. Sankoku once again defended himself with a blood dome. The dragon hit the dome and exploded, but no harm was done to Sankoku. While Sankoku was defending, Okihiko made hand signs and placed his left palm in front of the cut. A gentle chakra was released from his palm and he began healing the wound. He immediately stopped the bleeding. He wanted to heal more, but he was once again attacked. He stopped using mystical palm jutsu and defended himself. As he defended, Okihiko analyzed, "If I can't defeat him, though I know more jutsus, the blood he controls is very versatile. And his chakra is higher than mine as well. I guess I should just stall. Defeating him without Sora's Fuyin Jutsu wouldn't be possible." Seeing that he couldn't win, Okihiko fought with the intent of only stalling. Sankoku attacked very aggressively, but he couldn't get through Okihiko's defense again. He also tried to get away from Okihiko without any success. The entire battlefield turned into a stalemate. Whoever won first would turn the scales in their favor. Miko and Fujin were extremely annoyed. They held the advantage for the majority of the time, and yet, they didn't manage to land a single hit on their opponent, and while Rinjuro's training had taught them to ignore all enemies' words, his constant taunts and slurs were getting on their nerves. Having fended off the latest round of attacks, the priest said, "This one was born in the land of lightning. When this one fought in the Great Ninja Wars, your parents hadn't even fucked each other. Run back to your academy, runts." Finally, Miko couldn't control her mouth. She attacked while yelling, "By the time I am done with you, you won't be capable of fucking anyone." The priest blocked her kunai and dodged Fujin's sword and replied, "I serve Lord Jushin. I haven't fucked anyone for over a decade." Fujin glanced at Miko. He thought, she is about to lose her cool. He looked at his opponent and thought, "I haven't engaged much in trash talking. I should consider adding it to my skills. I can think of a bunch of strong opponents who would go berserk with a good trash talk." Not wanting Miko to lose her control, Fujin commented casually, "I heard that you Jashinists have to sacrifice to your dumb god. Don't tell me that you have to sacrifice your private parts in order to be inducted into your little cult." Miko was surprised by Fujin's words. She wondered, when did he become so foul-mouthed? Even the priest watched Fujin with surprise. He said, "Of course not, we have to." Fujin interrupted him and said, "Considering that you are so proud about sacrificing them, I guess that they were very pathetic." The priest immediately yelled, "You little unk." However, Fujin instantly flickered in front of him and slashed with his sword horizontally. The priest immediately moved backward and jumped out of the path of Fujin's attack. Seeing that his opponent was in the air, Fujin fired a dozen air bullets at him. While attacking, he thought, "What a pro, even his anger was fake." The priest immediately weaved a couple of hand signs and extended both his arms forward. Lightning arcs appeared between his palms. Lightning release lightning beam jutsu. The priest fired a lightning beam straight at Fujin. The beam was very wide and completely covered the priest. All the air bullets crashed into the beam. They hindered the lightning beam slightly, but couldn't pierce through. Fujin watched the lightning beam coming at him. He didn't move. He focused chakra in his throat and converted it into wind. When the beam was just a meter away from him, he opened his mouth and fired a vacuum bullet. However, unlike Fujin's earlier vacuum bullets, this one was huge. It would be more appropriate to call it a vacuum cannon instead. It pierced straight through the center of the enemy's lightning beam and dispersed most of it. The priest was shocked. He tried to use the force of his own jutsu to move out of the way while in the air. Miko was surprised as well. Launching an attack in such a way meant that Fujin won't be able to dodge. However, realizing the risk Fujin took, Miko flickered close to the priest to attack him. It looked like this fight would finally have a result soon.